Final preparations. So, where is Igor Mikhailovich? Hello, we are already waiting for you at the studio.
Just 5 minutes, okay?
Okay, thanks. All right. Let's go and see where the girls are. Girls, we are ready. We are waiting for you. Please come. All right then, we will start soon. 5 minutes and we will start. Okay. Hello again.
Hello. Greetings.
Good day. Greetings.
Greetings.
Today, we'd like to talk about the reason why we shot all the previous experiments and why we showed them. What the point is, we've actually received a lot of feedback, a lot of letters and calls about that. This has evoked a certain interest in people. But in the first place, we filmed and showed this for people to realize that besides this visible world, there is another world as well, which our eyes don't show to us in our ordinary, let's say, perception. We actually didn't want to arouse enthusiasm for magic, but it worked just the other way around. Many took interest not in the spiritual side of the matter, but rather in the aspects of power. Somehow, people approached it sort of without understanding. The last experiment on the astral projection that we shot has also evoked many questions. People have even started arguing, in the sense that the astral plane is good. Well, as for us, anyway, we do know who is arguing and why, so we'd like to explain it a little bit. Perhaps we won't show it. We even thought about showing it. We've got videos with some people concerning the astral plane. People came here to the coordination center and were telling how good, how interesting it was, that the astral plane was just so cool, and it was you who were shooting that, right?
Yes.
The video about that guy and about the others. What did they say? They say that everything changes greatly in the astral plane. There happens to be some other world there and perception is different. Well, everything is so fairy and beautiful, and even practices.
Emotions are more intense.
Yes, emotions are more intense and so on. And that it is indeed some existing world where people get into. Unlike, so to say, lucid dreaming, right? They clearly differentiate it, lucid dreaming, as some people claim, who practice these conscious, out-of-body, astral projections. They say that lucid dreaming is a controlled dream. All this is an illusion, where a person, like God, creates everything he wants. They say that they like it, while in the astral plane everything is for real. There are bright colors there, and everything, and practices work out well. Now, I'd like to clarify what the astral plane actually is. When a person transitions to a higher dimension, this world gets distorted. When people tell you that they see the three-dimensional world in whatever colors, but if at least one object is three-dimensional there, it's not the astral plane. It's a hallucination. It's a result of brain work. Both lucid dreams and astral projections with bright colors, emotions, and so on are all just phases of sleep. But the difference is that for a transfer to lucid dreaming, a person has to lie down. And when he is falling asleep, there is a phase, as they call it, unto which one can hook. When personality starts detaching, but still finances what consciousness offers him. And here, a person allegedly can order whatever he likes, meet with whoever he wants, well, model various situations just like in a computer game, so to say. In actual fact, who does all this instead of a person, except his consciousness? Well, and those who stand behind consciousness, is it really personality? No. In the astral plane, when people perform a certain practice, or similarly, in a transitional phase between sleep and wakefulness, people also enter that astral plane, or while performing certain practices like meditations or something else. A person consciously travels where he wants, to any point, just like the guy told you that he did. The reason why I refer to him is because the girls recorded him. He was telling a lot of beautiful and fairy things to them, and to other people as well. Everything is interesting, everything is beautiful and tempting. It's very attractive for consciousness that a person can get anywhere he wants, and everything is beautiful there. There are beautiful emotions and the like. What did we do? We invited him, in particular Andre did. And so we told them, since you can do astral projection easily to any place you want, let's carry out an experiment then. We suggested running a little test. It's the first test, which is the simplest. The one that we basically showed to you in the astral projection program.
We suggested the following. We suggested him. He is sitting next to us. The camera is on. Andre goes to the next room. There are 3 A4 paper sheets there. He writes down 3 random numbers between 1 and 999, photographs them on his mobile phone, comes back, and this guy who claims to have, let's say, astral traveling abilities enters that room and takes a look, and then he tells us these numbers, and we show him the photograph, and in addition, bring him these sheets so that we wouldn't be blamed for fraud and so on. Moreover, we asked him a question. Have you been to the room where the sheets are lying or not? He said he hadn't. I suggested to him that if it were necessary, he could enter that room. Before the experiment starts, come on, go into the room, have a look, get comfortable there. However, he said that it didn't work like this, that there were, as it turns out, several types of astral travels. And for the one which he practiced, he needed special conditions, that is, to lie down, that very transition between sleep and wakefulness.
Lucid dreaming, to put it simply. But basically, all these are fantasies from the mind. It's very interesting for consciousness to seize, let's say, power over personality with anything. In fact, this is magic. This is engagement in magic, a futile one at that, and so on. I would just like to address our viewers and say, if someone is telling you, guys, about the astral plane or something else, first of all, the astral plane is a conscious projection. Well, of someone, no matter what they call this, of a human out of his or her body. If this is controlled, then such an experiment as Andre has just told us, well, they are supposed to do it easily. We have shown you that this is possible, and besides, it's very easily possible. Secondly, if a person needs to lie down to relax, to switch to a phase, well, this already indicates that it's a fantasy. It's the same as when someone is talking about magic, that one should blow on water until it turns into milk. Guys, you should suggest them. Let them themselves first show how this is done. And then, well, let's say you can keep listening if it is interesting for you. But in actual fact, what I'd like to say is that magic is not quite what is written and told about. Magic does exist. Moreover, everyone, almost each of you, is engaged in it, in this magic all day long. People do this, and they don't know what they are doing. Well, regarding this, many people in our movement record selfies now and describe this quite clearly.
That very Olga Simpson, right?
I recommend you to watch her insights. In a simple form, she conveys that the most ordinary flirting is also nothing but that very magic. Ordinary mundane magic. Our desires, our thoughts. Question: are they actually ours? Have you ordered them? Here is a simple question. Do you order these thoughts which come to your head? Certainly not. They appear by themselves and produce an impression as if you have wanted that, and they control you. You as personality are controlled by your thoughts. Psychologists would say, this is actually normal. That's how it should be. But on the other hand, if you are a normal, reasonable person, you don't need it when you...
Like Simpson was telling.
She has a husband. Why would you flirt with anyone? What for? And what do you need to be an alpha female for? In order to satisfy your pridefulness, right? Does this make any sense? In fact, this makes no sense. She has actually given and indicated good insights, and there are plenty of such cases, and people are engaged in this literally all day long. They listen to themselves carefully, reveal various... For instance, they say that they have watched a program and started listening. Yes, indeed. Thoughts come about suicide and about everything. Guys, but they come all the time, and these thoughts have always been coming. After all, consciousness stereotypically imposes thoughts on every person to do something bad. To quarrel with someone, well, and many other things. To desire, to wish, to dream, to exalt oneself. A person, here's a trite example, okay? A person is watching TV. For instance, a singer is singing on a stage. Everyone is applauding him. Next, the person already begins to imagine himself on the stage, as if he is singing. Yet who imagines? In actual fact, these are those same actors in his head, meaning consciousness is playing such an illusion for him, while personality is paying for this with its life, in fact. Just in order for you to have an understanding of what magic is, magic, guys, magic is a contract. Under this contract, a person pays with life for an illusion. But there is no guarantee that he'll even acquire this illusion. Many people just pay. Well, let's say for their desires and intentions, which they don't eventually get. And this should also be known, and this should also be thought about. Let's go back to astral projection. What is astral projection? We have demonstrated what astral projection is. Here's another example. They often show, half asleep, in slumber, a person is telling something. Well, many refer to the fact that there was such a clairvoyant as Edgar Cayce, but few people know that it was an active subpersonality that worked in him. He possessed no skills. His only skill was, well, like Billy Milligan. He conked out and gave away and access to the source of life, to the subpersonality, which was doing everything for him. He even had more than one there. Thus, all this is much more serious. Unfortunately, this is unexplored. But let's say thousands and thousands of people today confirm this. Of those who really work on themselves, they notice this, they see it, and they perfectly realize it. Here's a simple example. A person led his life. Well, we've just talked today. He led a normal life. Nothing ever happened. He has watched the program about suicide, and he says, it turns out. He says, I have plenty of thoughts. When everything is fine, everything is wonderful in my life. But suddenly, thoughts about suicide come. He's driving a car, and a thought comes, meaning someone is telling him in his head, what will happen if you drive into oncoming traffic? Well, do such thoughts appear in a healthy person with normal psyche? They do appear. They appear in everyone. And if someone says that this is normal, well guys, I'll say it's not normal. It's exactly the dictation. If at the right moment, when a person is open, distracted, or has some life situation, and this mindset enters and personality finances it, this is exactly what will happen. And there are many, very many situations like that. This is banal work. And here, of course, certain forces from the invisible world are involved. The stereotypical work of the system, plus conduits. These are not myths, not some fantasy. We already have plenty of evidence when people confirm, when they themselves have experienced these attacks by conduits, and so on, which are impossible to repulse. This is also a section of, let's say, magic. But thank God, not many people know about it, and all the more, only few use it, compared to the entire humanity. Of course, there are many of them today, but not as many as those who engage in magic at the mundane level, every day. So, going back to the astral plane, we have shown what the astral, the real projection, actually looks like. Firstly, what is it? In order to have an understanding, a human being is quite complex by his or her structure. There is personality. It's exactly the one who gains life. That's you and me. I mean, the real us. It's those who listen to what consciousness is telling. It's the one who perceives all that, and the one who eventually either becomes a subpersonality or gains life eternal. Much has been written about this, and this is basically mentioned in all religions. Whoever wants to will find. The only thing is that epithets are different, and it is called in different ways, but the essence and meaning remains the same. Thus, there is personality, and there is primary consciousness. Primary consciousness is that child who, even, let's say, even the smartest person in the world remains a little child while he's already many years old. And he's already a respectable person, but inside he has remained a child. Why? Because this primary consciousness has a certain level of its development, while secondary consciousness is an active consciousness. It is almost untrainable, so to say, almost uncontrollable, and all the magic and many other things are controlled by this secondary consciousness. Let's say, but there's also another point here. Magic is control of personality, manipulation of personality by secondary consciousness, not by primary one, but exactly by secondary one. Investment of powers and potential should be very high in order to implement at least something, whereas what we showed, it's exactly those who are indeed in the service of the spiritual world. These are the ones who stand up for a lot of people, so that, let's say, wrong thoughts would come to one's head as rarely as possible. Well, and sometimes they help some people actually not to lose what we call life, even the temporary life, the existence here. And this is a chance. It's a great chance to gain greater life, the eternal one. So, we have shown what the difference between a Geliar and a magician is. The difference is that this person who dedicates his or her life to service, well, gaining certain skills, surely, it's not done within one day. It's the greatest and hardest work, in fact. And in order to show you even such an experiment, the person who participated, the operator, underwent a tremendous load on the personality for controlling secondary consciousness. And I'm saying honestly, an untrained person will never endure such loads. It is preservation of absolute control in such a way that secondary consciousness is located at a distance anywhere, at any point. No problem with that. But the world is perceived totally differently. There is no three-dimensionality there. I've already mentioned in the previous program as well that everything changes 2 or 3 dimensions higher, meaning at the level of the 6th dimension, while they work precisely at the level of the 6th dimension. But well-trained Geliars can go even higher. However, those are already different tasks. These are the people who have already attained a greater degree of freedom and have gained life, so to say. But in actual fact, while performing this astral projection, there's absolute control and an absolute connection. It is instantaneous. This may, well, be attributed to quantum physics, when one and the same electron is located in several places simultaneously. In the same way, a person is located at several places simultaneously. That is, his or her consciousness is divided, and it is controlled, and it is under absolute control of the personality. But another thing is that personalities also develop. They need to mature and to acquire experience. Some still play around, but that's another thing. The point is that there can be no dream here. A lucid dream is an oppressed state of personality. While here, on the contrary, there is a predominant state of personality. And the person is immediately telling what he or she sees. In this state, he or she can see, hear, and perform a certain action depending on the potential. Because even an impact of moving a pen, which is easy for us here, implies such a tremendous load which a rare weightlifter can cope with. Because other powers are spent, other powers are used. It's impossible to talk verbally like we communicate here, for there is no vocal apparatus. But they can communicate with people at the level of, again,
The third dimension.
what does this mean? This is like, well, a person can communicate with someone, just like our operator in the last program. The person will perceive it as his own thought. He won't hear a voice. If a person is trained, he will hear a voice. while an untrained person won't distinguish his thought from someone else's thought. Well, that's basically how Kandukes work as well. They implant information, implant thoughts, and a person perceives them as his own. Why? Because he perceives himself as consciousness. It's also a very serious problem when a person perceives himself as consciousness and cannot distinguish. Actually, for this very reason, guys, we are showing and telling you everything so that you think at least a little, so that you observe yourselves at least a little bit which thoughts come to you and whether you order them or not. If you don't order them, but these thoughts do come, if you don't want to be angry with your relatives and friends, but hatred boils up in you and consciousness tells you, well, you are exactly like this isn't true. You are exactly like this because it's beneficial to your consciousness, which manipulates you and lives instead of you. At this time, you are not living. If you are not living now, you won't live later either. This is precisely preparation of personality by consciousness for subsequent existence, as they say in religions, in hell, or existence, in the state of subpersonality. Certainly,
The cult of subpersonality is tremendous.
and today I hope we'll talk about this. I hope we'll expand on other topics as well. Basically, I hope you have understood why we recorded that and showed you all these experiments, so that you ponder at least a little and stop. Stop when unnecessary thoughts seize you, when you are controlled by anger, when you are controlled by fury. Personality doesn't see and doesn't perceive this three-dimensional world. It perceives it through consciousness. And here, this mediator, well, it precisely takes over this function. I'll give you whatever I want. I'll show you whatever I like. But all this can be trained and taught. This is exactly that discipline. These are exactly those true grains which are available in all religions, where people are taught to love each other. After all, there are no bad religions, in fact. Why? Because religions are based exactly on the truth, on Allatra. Why on Allatra? Because everything that is sacred is precisely Allatra. It has been so since the beginning of time. However, eventually it was forgotten and started to be called differently. Yet, a simple question, is there a difference in what we call it? Whatever epithets we call Allatra, the Holy Spirit, or something else, Allatra is the power of God. It's the power of God, which is here and gives an opportunity, gives personality a chance to gain life eternal, while everything else is already assumptions and trite alterations by people. Again, we see there is one religion, and lots of various branches. After all, when the prophets came, did the prophet come? And did he really give many different branches? No, he came and gave the truth, whereas trends and branches are what people were making. Why? Because they didn't agree on some trifles. They didn't agree. In actual fact, they didn't agree to share power and other stuff, if we call things by their names. But again, no matter which trends and divisions there are in religions, all of them are based on grains of the truth. And these grains of the truth originate from the prophet. They originate from the spiritual world. They originate from God, and everything that originates from God is exactly His power. It's exactly His truth. It's His love, and it's precisely Allatra. I understand that many people will be told, and this will make many people indignant. But this is, pardon me, another provocation for you. What gets indignant inside you and doesn't perceive is exactly your consciousness. It is consciousness that creates these thoughts and everything else. After all, there is no difference in the name, whether it's the Holy Spirit or Allatra. It is merely a name, the name of one power, the name of one love. Today, again, we would like to go back a little to the past, to one of the programs, and to see how consciousness is working.
And again, this is the consciousness of a person who watches herself.
However, nonetheless, it still interferes, meaning we'd like to show how strong it is and what substitutions it makes. Well, I think Lilia will tell us better.
Yes, thank you. I precisely wanted, I've asked permission to be present at this program because I actually noticed, right when I was watching the Invisible World video, I understood what had happened there.
Well, just say right away that you participated in that program
Yes.
and you were telling about your personal experience.
How consciousness has worked. It turns out that I started my story with a phrase that, after I already began to perform practices, but didn't work on myself, this creature started attending me, and so in actual fact,
Well, people might be watching us for the first time without having seen that program. Therefore, we should explain. We were talking about the invisible world, about those who hide in the shadows, and in particular about incubi and so on, which come to people. Well, someone perceives this as a myth, but those who have experienced this, for them it's not a myth. For them, it's an absolute reality. And so, Lilia is one of those people who indeed experienced all this. But what is so interesting about this situation? It's exactly that when she started telling, I'll interrupt and talk instead of you a little bit, okay? For you are being nervous. I see. You are again nervous. It's again the game of consciousness, you see? Last time it was exactly the same. After all, it's indeed not easy to tell about yourself in front of a camera, and so on. But the person is fighting. She's trying to gain the most important and hardest victory, the victory over herself, as they used to say in the past, meaning the victory over her consciousness, to distinguish, to separate herself from the dead, to separate herself from consciousness. Well, and naturally, the first steps are always difficult. But what has happened? While telling exactly about her personal experience, she again underwent a certain substitution from consciousness. Right?
yes.
So tell us.
Yes, it turns out that I've voiced the point that these creatures started coming to me in a certain period of my life when I started performing practices, meaning, but in actual fact, this began in my very childhood. That is, since childhood, I felt this invisible world and these visits of creatures happened. Then I recalled what it all had started with. And there is another thing. Now,
Don't worry.
thoughts are just racing.
Well, thoughts are supposed to be racing because, again, when we really speak about consciousness, when we speak about our life, it begins to hinder. It becomes tame after proper training.
Right. It's just that this moment, when in that program I began to speak, then I also felt a very strong agitation, and such a point turned out that while I was directing attention at coming down, I already didn't notice how I started speaking, and there was such a sort of sensation as if I wasn't there when I started speaking. That is, as if consciousness instead of me.
And this is an important point. It's an important point. You have heard right now, consciousness speaks instead of me. Guys, just think, how often does consciousness speak instead of you? Do you really order that phrase which you'll pronounce the next time? It turns out people speak almost without thinking. As a rule, this relates to mundane topics and to everything, but also to spiritual things. Here's a simple example. I'll interrupt a little and digress. A simple example. In one of our programs, we carried out an experiment with our pyramid, and Constantine participated, who showed a very high potential. It was incredibly high for an untrained person who is not engaged in, so to say, special practices. Well, whoever wants will watch. So, Constantine has recently told me that he engaged in self-development, in training of his consciousness, let's say in observations. And to put it simply, he started working on his spiritual growth. And he noticed such an interesting thing. While talking to people, he started pronouncing and talking about what he didn't know himself. And he says, I am talking and learning from myself. He didn't know that, which he was voicing. Naturally, this relates precisely to spiritual things. Thus, if one approaches this correctly, after all, this is exactly what is coming from the Spirit. It is broadcasted from the spiritual world. But it is broadcasted through a person, and the person, let's say, is also surprised with what is being said through him. He hears that for the first time. Constantine has had this experience. It's a marvelous experience. But it was mentioned, guys, thousands and thousands of years ago, that it's enough for you to open your mouth and the Spirit will broadcast instead of you. People really experience this in practice now. Constantine is one of the vivid examples. Well, thank God. We have plenty of such examples already. And guys, talk a lot about this, but there is another side. After all, everything repeats itself fractally, with a change in the sign. In the same way, a person, let's say, an ordinary one who lives a banal, simple, mundane life, even the one who attributes himself to some religion, but doesn't engage in spiritual development, doesn't accumulate spiritual love, so to say, and doesn't develop in his daily life, he lives as dictated by consciousness, in the literal sense of the word. And suddenly, anger seizes him for no particular reason, and he begins to quarrel. But then he comes to his senses. What have I done? And he goes and apologizes. Well, such a mundane situation often happens. And if we ask, who was talking instead of him, and who was acting instead of him, after all, he was also a detached observer at that moment. This is also a good experience when a frightened personality observes what consciousness is doing and what the body's doing. After all, people do see that. Every personality detects that. Well, sometimes consciousness, let's say, playing on pridefulness, shows how cool a person is, how serious he is, and so on. Well, and people miss this point that they have observed this. Pardon me, this is just practice, which I've mentioned here, so to say, for understanding. Go on.
And so I'd like to go back then. I've just recalled what this all started with in childhood, precisely when these creatures started coming to me. Well, everything began at the age of 6, when my grandfather died. I remember that morning I woke up very joyful and happy, meaning in such a state as I usually woke up in, and it was a natural state in that period of my life. And I remember that I came to the kitchen and my sister was standing there chopping potatoes. And I noted for myself at that moment that it was surprising that they made her do that. Why did they make her? And there was immediately such a fear that they would make me do that too. And suddenly she tells me, "Why are you so happy? Grandpa has died." And she certainly said that with an emotion, and I had such a stupor then. I closed the door behind me, went back, sat on a sofa, and started thinking. At that moment, I simply understood, first of all, I noted for myself that I was indifferent to this death. I was just told that he had died, and I understood that I had absolutely no attitude to that. But in order to, well, my sister said, "Why are you so happy? You should somehow..." I understood that I needed a different mode of behavior so that...
It's interesting what a 6-year-old child is thinking, to develop a different mode of behavior. Well, a child prodigy.
It is now that I'm using such words.
I understand.
To develop a mode of behavior, but at that time I only thought that I had to make others what others would think.
To play.
I had to play, yes, to play this. Moreover, then I decided that...
We all know that children are great manipulators.
Right, and not just to play sadness, sorrow for the fact that my grandfather died, but even on the contrary, to exaggerate that I am so special. Well, meaning on the one hand, I feel that I'm indifferent, but on the other hand, I'm making a decision to play a role that I'm not indifferent at all, and that I need just to exaggerate my sorrow and start crying. So then I made a decision and I started crying. And suddenly my parents came in later, my mother, my father, and surely that provoked, well, it sort of attracted attention to me.
They started soothing you.
Soothing, of course.
You liked that because so much attention was invested.
Then I remember that on the day of the funeral, only my aunt and I were crying there, while everyone else sort of, meaning everyone behaved surely with such sorrow in their faces, sort of in the atmosphere of this morning. And there is another point which I remember, that when I came to school afterwards, I also started playing on this already among my classmates. That is, again, that my grandpa had died and I was in that image, like that. So it turns out that this took hold. This mode of behavior took hold as a very good means of manipulation.
This mask stuck to you, well, because it was very convenient and hard to get rid of.
And so, we come to
the shadows, yes. And it turns out that later on, the following started happening, that I noticed that this situation had launched not just one mechanism, definitely not just one. I pushed more than one button, and that's what began to develop in me. Firstly, the fear of death appeared. At night, when I went to bed, I remember that night I was going to bed. It seemed to me that it was after the funeral. I don't remember which one specifically. I just realized that my sister would die, my mother would die, my father would die, and I would die. And I realized that it was horrible, and what's the point then? And I started experiencing this fear of death. It seized me every night. And in addition, I'll just tell you everything now. All the mechanisms just everything which started from that point on. And one of such points is that I came to my mom later and said that I was afraid of death, and what she answered to me also played a very big role. Back then, she told me that I still had a lot of time to live, so why would I be afraid? I should think about the good things. Well, switch attention, in fact. And she said, think about your cartoons, think about something good. I lay down then, just on that very night, I thought, I shall think about the good things in order to switch from this fear. But cartoons and cartoon images didn't work, and it so happened that I couldn't focus attention on them for a long time. And consciousness immediately offered images from movies which were more exciting and which actually unfolded themselves. They really unfolded themselves. That is, with a cartoon I had to, yes, I enjoyed The Little Mermaid then, and I had to strain myself in order to create to recall something, some scene, while back then it sort of easily unfolded itself and attention got switched indeed.
And which scenes were there? Which movies?
Everything began, well, the first movie, I don't remember the title. I remember the image of that person. There was a man from an American movie. And what everything began with is that I simply imagined death as such an inscription, and he sort of pushed it away from me, and fear abandoned me along with that. And then, apparently, there began some scenes. The next movie was definitely the Hercules TV series. I took the main character from there for myself, and so some adventure stories started happening. Well, and next, then it has already developed into a whole movie in my head with all...
Well, consciousness always takes main characters.
Yes, of course.
And it compares a person with them, or substitutes, puts him in the role of the main character.
Right.
Or at least of someone close to him.
Right, and what's interesting is that later on, when I was looking at this situation and at my relationships with people, at how I behaved with them throughout my life, and this is still happening. The inner dragon which is inside me, I understand that it was brought up back then in those images, precisely in those situations when I thought up those stories for myself, that I was better than anyone. Although in life that didn't correspond with reality. You've said such a phrase that when a person engages in mundane magic in fact, he pays with his life, although he doesn't always get this. And precisely in this case, it turned out that those movies in my head were even enough for me. So there was no need for this to happen in life.
But after all, you already got that.
Yes, sure.
Here's a simple question. A person is doing something, or a person is thinking about something, but there is no difference at all. Whether you've thought about doing a bad thing, or you've done something bad, it already exists in fact. Whether it exists in an illusion or exists in this three-dimensional reality. But you'll pay for this anyway.
Moreover, even in childhood, when I had images and I created all those stories in my head, then I even noticed an evolution. That is, I clearly remember such key points when, well, it was still scary to think about something because it seemed to me that it was, well, impermissible. And I remember those moments when I was taking this step to overstep this and give it a try. And since I tried and there was no punishment, so I could continue. And so...
Try what? Which steps?
Well, for example, to involve myself in some scenes, precisely those which were impermissible before, or, for instance, to kill a person in those thoughts, or even to imagine my own death in those situations.
Well, in actual fact, regarding taking away another person's life, or wishing another person's death, almost everyone thinks about this, and quite a lot. One of the desires to acquire magic power is precisely to dictate, to control other people's lives and deaths. Yet, why do people lust for power so much? And what draws them? After all, not other people's adoration, but exactly the ability to determine someone's fate, meaning to be godlike, to decide who is to live and who is to die. This strongly captures, so to say, immature personalities.
That's right, shadows. And soon after, in fact during the same period, I started sensing someone's presence at night. During that period in childhood, when this fear of death already emerged, when I constantly experienced it and constantly had nightmares in my dreams. And everything began from the point when I started hearing sort of some rustles. At first I thought that no, nothing like that was there, but I did feel someone's presence. I really felt it. And back then, I even thought that it was my deceased grandfather who was probably coming to me. Although I actually realized that wasn't true, but this, not that it flattered me, but rather, well, it was sort of playing on some specialness, that I was sort of special. Well, like, not only did I mourn for him, but he was also coming to me. And that was indeed some exceptionality. Plus, later on, I was telling my friends about this, that someone was coming to me at night, without fear at that, and precisely for the purpose.
And when they came, what did they do? Were they just standing near you?
Well, that was very frightening. Yes, they were just standing nearby. There was a moment, I remember, when I felt that someone as if has sat down on my bed and it even sagged, meaning someone sat down physically, for real. I remember that I experienced fear. When I experienced fear, the only place where I could go was into the images in my head.
From one image to other images. That is, to put it simply, this started as long ago as in childhood.
Yes, that started as long ago as in childhood.
But nevertheless, it appears that during the program,
I've said that it started when I already started doing practices.
and what came out of that? That after the practices, all these things started happening to you. And what do you think? Why did consciousness say it precisely this way?
In order to settle this, firstly, and I would have it. I just understand that I also accepted that it was true, that indeed, after I started doing practices, these creatures started coming to me. And I'll voice the arguments which consciousness had. If I've performed the right practices, hence, there is this pure Allat, which they're actually coming for. As a matter of fact, this is exactly what attracted them. And indeed, I thought I've believed that.
Pridefulness has played a role again, and you believed in this. You believed because of what? Because of pridefulness. You forgot about your childhood.
I forgot about my childhood.
Yes, but in the same way, other people can also hear this and think of it. However, what I'd like to say, can practices, after all, the simplest practices are actually described so that a person, let's say, would be able to distinguish himself from consciousness. Well, and to realize a little bit what the human structure is, what personality is, and to gain at least some initial experience. Basically, people attain these insights through prayers and through various religions, diverse religions, but it's a longer way, and it also requires devotion. While here, there is an easier way that was practiced God knows how many millennia ago, and it is still effective while working on oneself. But this is exactly described in the book Allat, and much has been said about this. When a person starts performing practices, the working and real ones, but he craves for getting powers and investing these powers into his material desires, then naturally, he can get a totally opposite effect. Is this possible? It's possible. That's why these tools are given solely for spiritual growth, for gaining life, but not for exchanging one's own life for the illusion of the material world. Like our today's heroine. These are just games, just pridefulness, and how much suffering she had to experience, in fact. Isn't it so? Well, we've now listened a little bit. I feel sad, to be honest. Instead of living, the person was playing. And who of you are living, to be honest? And how much do we play? But unfortunately, people fuse with this illusion to such an extent that this game, the wearing of these masks, becomes life for them. And people believe that they live, that they have achieved something, that they are right. Unfortunately, this happens far and wide. Why? Just because they have forgotten what their holy fathers, those who learned something greater, were telling them. Well, this is already another topic. Thank you, of course, but if you want to add anything, go ahead.
I actually wanted to say a lot regarding these mechanisms which get activated in childhood. Well, anyway, it turns out that one situation in childhood, basically one choice.
May I put it shorter? A decision made in childhood can run as a red line through one's entire life. And here Freud was right in a certain sense, but he considered everything solely from such materialistic standpoints, a bit from a wrong angle. While what we embed in ourselves in childhood, later on, we carry it throughout our life, especially if this is caused by magic, by game, by the wearing of masks. And this affects not just ourselves, but also our close ones, those whom we take responsibility for, our relatives, our friends. Isn't it so?
It is. And there was also a point which this situation started as well. It was opposition to God. I remember at that time I sort of challenged. I also decided to challenge God, although I realized that I didn't need that at all, but still
Don't justify yourself.
Yes. I said bring my grandpa back. If you do exist, just bring my grandpa back.
Guys, this is the key point. Tell me, who of you haven't said such a phrase? And also think, well, whether you had ever heard it before, you started saying this ever since childhood. Well, something like, Lord, if you exist, let this girl kiss me, or let this boy approach me, or Lord, if you exist, let my stomach stop aching. Well, and the further, the more. Lord, if you exist, let this issue be resolved. Let this deal be concluded, or let I not be fired from this job. Well, and if you exist, and all the time people demand proofs from God that He exists, but the point is that God never proves anything to anyone. And in fact, God starts seeing a person, no matter how sad it is. I understand that this hits many people's pridefulness and their, so to say, religious perceptions. But God starts seeing a person only when the person starts living. And this was said in the past, but our understanding of life, for instance, we believe that we live here. Whereas from the perspective of the spiritual world, when a person starts living a spiritual life, immortal life, that's when he becomes a part of the spiritual world or approaches it, and that's when God sees him. While everything else, as God grants, as God decides, oh Lord, if you tell me, I'll go and do this. Well, this is the same as, pardon me for being straightforward, I hope children are not watching. This is the same as your spermatozoa would tell you. Do you hear them? Or your egg cells? Just the same. You listen to them attentively and say, yes, 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 Masha, Vasya, Petya, okay. Now I'll turn to the other side so that you wouldn't be pressed when we are sleeping. This is a joke, but it's true. Everything is repeated fractally. The laws are inviolable for everyone, and it's impossible to break them. However, there's one more but. When a person is bargaining this way, trying to bargain with God prove that you exist, so I'll pray to you, I'll respect you, or something else, but he doesn't get what is his, what he desires, then he says, well, if God hasn't given it to me, I'll go to Satan. And he starts seeking opportunities to conclude a deal with Satan. And already, with awareness, by his own choice, by the choice from consciousness, and with awareness from consciousness. Pardon me, I have interrupted you.
Okay, it appears that from that moment on, there began, kind of like a war. Well, not really a war in my head, but I remember there were constant claims to God, constant sorting out of some relationships at the level of consciousness.
As if he's your friend, right? Well, certainly at the level of consciousness.
And now I understand that all these claims and this entire war were exactly based on the fact that things were not the way I wanted. Just because...
Was it really you who wanted?
Well, yes.
Here's a simple question. You've just said, things were not the way I wanted. But who created your wishes? After all, did you need most of everything you wanted?
No.
Well, literally, did you really need that retiree, Schwarzenegger?
No.
But you were dreaming of him.
Well, this is, it's just that at those moments, there was such a state that sort of a desire arose inside. And then it turns out that I would pick an image which could satisfy that desire. And not all images. Well, and it turns out that I was picking them over and over, and then, here we go, this one worked. That's it. And it turns out that, well, who actually controlled which image would satisfy that?
Your desire.
Yes, my desire.
It's funny when you begin to sort this out and already start evaluating all this. Let's say,
Even evaluating consciousness by means of consciousness.
and consciousness itself comes to a deadlock. Because there's nothing to present as arguments. And here psychology, psychiatry, and everything in the world cease to work. They just don't work. Because those questions which you reveal for yourself during the search, everything comes down to what? We again come to the fact that psychology and psychiatry, that is, science, doesn't work. Just religion remains. Because this has a response inside. But here comes an understanding of the fact that behind this mirage of creativity, there is also something real which can be found.
Surely.
And it is true.
Yes, of course. I even remember this period. Well, I do remember that at these moments, despite everything that was happening, despite the war in my head, there was a sincere aspiration for God too. Even there, I remember how,
Despite your claims to Him.
right, despite my claims to Him, but I just wanted to sort of finally resolve all these issues somehow.
Yes, because the personality of any person strives for home. It strives for God. And unfortunately, consciousness often plays on this. Well, and other people play too. By creating some closed organizations and all the rest exactly on this. Well, we are yet to approach this exactly on that aspiration of personality for the spiritual world. This way, let's say, some people, using these comprehensions, establish various sects. As we have already said, they distort the knowledge, distort long-standing religions, and establish additional branches. And what does this lead to? Well, I believe it would be better if Olya told us. She's a person who has partaken a bit of this pie.
The pie was not very
Not sweet, but it contains some meaning as well. This is still not an empty thing. It's an experience.
Of course. And if we look at how everything began, at how the pie was being eaten, so to say, I came to the coordination center. That was at the very beginning when I had just read the books, started doing practices, and was curious. And I had problems with business partners. I got some questions and came up to one of the participants. He recommended me to get in touch with one of the people who basically was already within the organization, who had already taken part in certain programs, and who was a close associate, the inevitable stereotype of an authority.
Whom your consciousness presented as a certain authority that has some skills and knowledge.
Yes, certainly, right.
I believe it should be noted here. Well, you don't have to name him. There is no need for that. But his authority was also supported by the fact that this person was actually a clergyman, right?
Yes, of course.
This always happens to people, a clergyman himself. And everything is already perceived somehow differently, right?
Naturally, and all the more aspiration for God. Any person who is searching is basically, his or her consciousness wants to look for these attributes in everything, even in the external, in order to confirm that you're on the right path, so to speak.
Well, yes. Also, consciousness plays a dirty trick. We see a holy man in every priest. Well, as it should be, right? And consciousness convinces us of this, that if a man serves God, if he wears a long robe with a cross, then he must be perfect.
Closer to God.
Yes, closer to God than you are, and he must be a perfect person.
Considering how the system acted, basically the system acted through a human, and here, most likely, it is interesting to look not at the human image itself, but...
Not at him. Yes, there can be images, it doesn't matter.
Naturally, yes.
Here the whole point is exactly how the system worked and how your consciousness worked.
Of course.
After all, it wasn't he or anyone else who let's say, forced you into this sect, but it was your consciousness that led you there, wasn't it?
Of course, megalomania and pridefulness.
Of course. I'll just run forward in this story. After all, it was you who later recruited followers to this sect.
Of course.
Under its dictation, right?
Well, naturally.
It was consciousness.
Surely.
That's what was actually
a common
working.
pattern, yes.
Absolutely.
In principle, it works almost without fail.
But with good intentions.
Definitely, solely good intentions. And as I say, looking back at how the pattern worked and how it unfolded, and some reference points which, like Lilia has said, trigger entire mechanisms,
Surely.
now we would rather look at the situation from such a perspective. The first thing that happened, I explained the situation concerning my partners. Business is always about money. In principle, everything is plain and simple here. And he offered to do a visualization on the lotus flower in order to obtain...
What does it mean, visualization on the lotus flower?
I'll try to explain now. So, I had a goal to take money back from people, meaning I had problems with my partners and accordingly they didn't give me the money back. And that was the key point, to take the money back.
Meaning your money, which your partners didn't want to return to you.
Yes, partners, yes. And on his part, it was proposed to make a visualization on the lotus flower. What does this mean? You sit down, relax, so it is literally as an instruction. That is, you perform the lotus flower.
And what does it mean you perform the lotus flower?
Well, in his understanding and in mine at that time, it meant something good, at least relaxation.
So, performing a spiritual practice.
Well, no.
Or meditation.
This is certainly... Well, this is...
Well, you call it the lotus flower. In one of the books, one of the spiritual practices is described, which was called the lotus flower. It was called so in ancient times. Why? Because it is purity. What is the essence of this spiritual practice? I'll put it in a nutshell because people might not know. It means that a person should generate love in himself and subsequently intensify it. But this love is directed precisely to God, to the spiritual world. And the growth of this love should ultimately predominate in a person. This, I would compare this just like Jesus' prayer, which generates love for Jesus, for God, and the like. And a person commits himself entirely and completely to the service. The same is here. After all, the lotus flower precisely implies that a person learns to love, because many people don't know what love is. They don't know what care is. While this is the simplest practice, and at the same time, it's the most difficult one. At the first stage, a person using his own consciousness accustoms it to love, to care for something greater within himself, and eventually, to care not about himself, but to care for love in general. This is the meaning of this spiritual practice. And, as a matter of fact, if people perform it correctly, it takes people to such a very deep spiritual perception. Well, how in this context, the lotus flower...
The system, as always, takes the same names, doesn't it?
But it uses them in a completely different way.
Of course. Why invent a bicycle if it has already been invented?
Absolutely right. I don't argue.
Here in principle, I believe it's a standard behavior of the system.
Well, yes.
So, generally speaking, as a result of this...
No, this is interesting. Go on.
Meditation.
The meditation. What was the instruction?
Meditation, yes.
What did he tell you?
So, it's necessary to sit down, to relax, and in the end...
To imagine.
To imagine, yes.
To imagine at the level of visualization.
Yes, that's what is called visualization. To imagine the end result.
Yet, what does the lotus flower have to do with this? Or did he call it so? That this was visualization, meaning using visualization on how you imagine that they repay you the debt.
Yes, and then, talking about how the system works, we do know that the system will act and speak with you in the language which isn't just understandable, but you sort of have a disposition for it.
The one it has accustomed you to.
Right. And since the books had been read, and there was already an initial stage of practicing, therefore, naturally, this was digestible.
This magic on desires, meaning these magic tricks, he called the lotus flower, right?
Yes.
Okay, now it's clear. I'm sorry, I will be interrupting you, because not everyone understands. While these are important points, after all, these are the first steps. When a person experiences sort of a substitution, and instead of attaining love, a person starts wishing for material things, money that must be returned. But at the same time, since he called it the lotus flower, and you should have already been familiar with performing this practice, so here, you definitely open up internally, you strive for love, but at the same time, benefit should be brought to you along with love.
So it means using spiritual practice for material benefits, right?
Meaning a magic ritual.
Yes.
And this was said by the priest, right?
Yes.
The priest was teaching this.
The priest, exactly. And here, it should be noted that I was confused. Meaning, on the one hand, analysis unwittingly began. Wait, the Allatra had already been read.
Well, you knew what it was.
Yes, meaning I already understood that I mustn't do so. On the other hand, authority outweighed all arguments.
And what did you feel yourself? It's just interesting to dig in this. Why? These are important points. They are in fact extremely important when consciousness tells you one thing, while a third party imposes, let's say, its own goals. After all, this is nothing but the intervention of a third party. When the one whom you perceive as authority, it doesn't matter whether it is someone who has come out of the shadows tells you this at the level of thoughts, or a person tells you this verbally. This is influence, the influence on consciousness. Consciousness begins to play a certain game, but a human, as personality, still feels. It is that which we call conscience, premonition, or something else. Well, those who don't have an understanding of what personality really is, a person does feel. So what did you feel at those moments? Do you remember?
One of the cases, recalling what I felt, not at that time when it was announced to perform visualization, but when I arrived at the coordination center and met, generally speaking, I met that person and Andre too. It was precisely a mass acquaintance with representatives of Allatra IPM. And when I went home, no, as soon as that person entered the door, I instantly felt myself completely naked. Naked to such an extent that I wanted to literally cover myself. And there was a feeling that I just didn't control myself. Moreover, thoughts were flying by so fast. On the one hand, I didn't get what it was, and there was a total horror due to the incomprehension of what was happening.
This was even before that.
It was before that. It was literally the first meeting. Before we talked on the phone, it was basically sort of a face-to-face acquaintance in person.
So, did you feel this, or was it consciousness that was telling you this?
Consciousness was telling me this.
Right. Consciousness was imposing this sensation.
Yes.
After all, a person perceives through feelings in a different way.
Consciousness was telling me this. And if we talk about what happened next, I went home on the same day, and 7 days in a row, I literally, at that time, I still strongly believed in Jesus Christ, and in no way I belittle.
How is that? What does it mean at that time? Don't you believe in Jesus Christ now?
No, I mean like in Lord. It was still the period that was, and basically...
And I still have no doubt.
I have no doubt.
Moreover, I know that. Let's just say, in order to have an understanding, we will go back a little bit before. Even before you became familiar with Allatra.
Yes, for many years I had been attending a Protestant church. Actually.
Right, and now you've wanted to say that you still lived with those mindsets.
Yes, that's what I wanted to say, right.
I see.
And literally, what gave rise to this inner conflict in me, which I experienced, literally for 7 days in a row, I was experiencing firstly a very strong sexual arousal, which simply couldn't be relieved by any...
To whom? To what? To that man?
To two objects. They were Andre and that man.
You got lucky.
And by the way, consciousness threw in thoughts, and I just couldn't decide who provoked these sensations more. But the most terrible thing was that there was such violence inside.
And now we shall digress a little, okay? Well, we will do this a bit for understanding. What provoked these specific sensations? A desire to be an alpha female.
Of course.
Why? Because you saw in both of them a sort of alpha male.
Surely.
And a trite pattern of being close, got
To
activated.
be an alpha female,
Right.
to be better, cooler, higher.
And now we go back to Lilia, to what she was telling, that back in her childhood, there was Schwarzenegger who played roles. This is also sort of. He was there. He played the main role, and in other movies, main roles were played, and she always wanted exactly. We've just come back to the understanding. What are we telling this for? In order for you to understand how consciousness works, this is a typical pattern, and don't you have the same, guys? Go on, tell us.
To be the coolest animal, nothing new. So, for all 7 days, I had such an inner conflict. On the one hand, there was this influence in my body, which it was impossible to restrain it in any way, and that was in my head for 24 hours a day. While on the other hand, there was an understanding that it was some kind of violence, and I was actually standing on my knees in front of an icon. I wasn't up to the lotus flower. Why?
Okay. And now there's a point. You were standing on your knees. Why were you standing like that? And what were you doing?
By that time, we were...
Let's take exactly then, that time.
Sure, of course.
Feelings, thoughts.
Certainly. This is very important. Why? That was a typical pattern of behavior instilled from a Protestant church in which I believed for a very long time. That at any moment I need to start seeking God's face. This worked literally without fail.
God's power, God's love.
Yes.
God's face.
Right.
These are all epithets, while Allatra, it's all the meaning of one thing.
No matter what we call it.
It's the spiritual nature which all religions are based upon. It is what is present in a human being. After all, a human is dual. There is a mortal part in him, and there is the part which is potentially immortal, and there is immortal. It's that potentially immortal, that good which comes from God. It is precisely Allatra. It is God's power. It is God's love. It is God's face. And there's nothing wrong about that. This is true, and it's real. It's inherent. But the question is different. Why were you standing in front of an icon? And what were you praying for? Were you attaining love? Were you trying to gain eternal life? Or were you... What were you doing?
In this case, it was a cry for help. I didn't want these.
Did you want to get rid of these sensations?
Yes, of this obsessive sensation.
Were you asking for anything?
Yes, of course.
How? Just tell us. How? This is an important point. Just word for word, what?
Yes, sure. The prayer mostly. This was literally established, yes. The same thing was spinning in my head over and over, and it always...
What were you doing exactly?
I want nothing. I want God's face. Help me. I don't want these sensations. Take this away from me because nothing is important. By that time, I had already left the Protestant church. I was actually asked out. I made a competition to the pastor in the sense that I already began to realize that one should seek God's face first and foremost. And in that case, it was indeed a sincere appeal to God.
Meaning seeking spiritual purity.
Right.
The very Allatra.
Yes.
But not human games and manipulations.
Naturally. By that time, as I now understand, I had already mastered altered states of consciousness, which I also experienced when I was uttering prayers back then. It is now that I can understand what was happening. So what I wanted was this peace at least. When you're really composed,
when you are feeling joy and love.
Exactly. When you're really being joyful, whereas here was precisely an influence.
When you actually feel the presence of the Spirit, when Allatra is in you, when God is in you.
Right. Well, in this case, there was an obvious influence from the outside which I couldn't get rid of.
And after the prayer?
This lasted for 7 days in a row, 7 or 10, I don't remember.
So, despite your spiritual aspiration, consciousness still predominated.
Yes, consciousness predominated, and this was actually projected onto the body on consciousness precisely as sexual arousal, which I really couldn't get rid of. I remember Andrei was calling me, I didn't answer, and later on, in 10 or 7 days, I don't remember exactly, he got through to me and said, "Why haven't you been answering the phone?" At that point, I wasn't ready to tell him about my worries, I just said that I didn't feel well. Well, the answer followed. Don't be silent, you can talk.
He is right. It's necessary to talk.
Of course.
Communication.
So, in this case, whatever happened just happened.
And what was next?
Yes, this was the first milestone when the entire picture started unfolding, and this typical pattern started working. The next vivid moment was when we started to see each other at the coordination center. We communicated quite a lot, and the person was from a different city. He was leaving on that day for another city. And we talked on the phone, and I hung up, and that instant, it was truly unrequested, meaning we really don't order this. A very bright image came. Well, it was similar to a flash of light, how we, as consciousness, always draws who God is. Well, some light, a flash of light, similar to...
Well, not always. To some people, it gives precisely a three-dimensional face. So consciousness always tries to associate with the light. Well, and during any transmission, even of spiritual knowledge, we always give an association with something positive, with something that can be explained. Nowadays, due to the development of, say, science and everything else, it's easier to talk about this, while in the past, there was only light, darkness, and nothing more. That's why there can be associations either with light or actually with an image, whatever prevails in a person's consciousness.
Well, in that case, it was light. Most likely, this was taken from the Bible because I knew the Bible very well, taught it in that Protestant church, and perhaps it was the brightest image for me. And indeed, behind this light, later on, I was already analyzing that it had worked as a switch, not this light itself, but the fact that I felt some kind of bliss, some kind of amazement. Yes, it was some sort of amazement, but it entailed some pleasant amazement. It was a pleasant amazement, that's what I would call it. To be honest, I was pretty much... This lasted for several days. I called him back and said, we have just talked, and right now, I see this, I feel this. So, in response, I naturally got a confirmation. Well, of course. Well, basically.
For you talk to him and not to someone else.
Yes, that's right.
And not to Andre.
Well, yes. And generally speaking, it got fixed in consciousness. That was the second point, which actually sort of took...
As a confirmation.
As a confirmation.
A confirmation of chosenness and authority.
Of course, right. And I also recall a moment when Andre and I had a conversation later on, and some time had passed since all that. I told him that I had felt totally naked when we had met at the coordination center. And I also received confirmation that not all people feel this way. Those were also our idle talks, which seemed to be not so idle.
Okay, I have somehow got confused. Did you feel naked when that person whom we are talking about came in?
2 of them came in.
Ah, 2 of them.
Actually, 3 of them came in. Right. And consciousness, just like in Lilia's case, speaks an image to which you will react faster.
And then consciousness started weighing which of them was more authoritative, right?
Well, sure, naturally, yes.
The first one or the second one? I got it. For even I got confused. Full of fun.
Consciousness is fun to be with. It's this way all the time, right? That was the second point, and there was the third, very bright point, which confirmed all my correct sensations, correct guesses, and also established me on the position I'm on the right path, this is the right person. We came to the coordination center once again. At 9 p.m., all of us were doing the Allat practice. Well, and everyone went to separate rooms. Basically, everyone who was there understands how this happens. Generally speaking, everyone sits down, calms down, and performs the lotus flower spiritual practice, in particular Allat. In this case, it was Allat. And at that very time, precisely at that time, I actually experienced this heat. For real. It's a different matter that as I was analyzing it later on, in a flash, consciousness presented to me that when I opened my eyes and that person was sitting in front of me, meaning It wasn't God, it wasn't the Holy Spirit. No, it was from that person since he was there. This was his power. That's how consciousness presented it to me.
Well, of course, consciousness always seeks an object.
Naturally, an object is needed.
Meaning, regarding those sensations which you experienced, consciousness said, it is coming not from God, not from the inside.
Yes.
It is coming from an external object which you are observing, meaning exactly from this person, from the authority.
Yes, and I remember that at this moment...
As I understand, consciousness finally decided who.
Of course, certainly.
Thank God.
And another indirect confirmation was that several other people were in the room and they actually didn't feel that.
Well, because they were not as spiritually developed as you.
That's the point. And therefore, this is invariably, I'm better than everyone. Well, this is unambiguous.
That's the way. It cannot be otherwise.
Well, there were no other options, so to say. And basically, these three sort of starting points actually formed a clear opinion on how I had to proceed. And so...
And now, interesting things begin. How did you actually proceed?
Yes, and here it begins. The first move was basically, we simply established a joint venture together with his religious organization.
So, the interest eventually came down to making money, business, right?
Naturally, of course.
It's a classic.
It's a classic.
Because money comes first.
Well, it goes without saying. So we opened a joint venture where the religious organization was the founder and I was the CEO of this organization. Therefore...
And you were the one who had to make money, as I understand.
Well, naturally.
If it's a religious organization, it couldn't earn. Got it.
Right. And generally speaking, a program was developed, so we worked as a 50-50 partnership. Well, those amounts which I've mentioned, which I was earning, would naturally inspire any average person. Pardon me, but this is really so.
Swindler, to put it simply.
Yes, right. And it was indeed alluring. And I was immediately offered to invest a part of the money and we would establish a company and we would run together.
He offered you to invest your money.
Of course, immediately on the same day.
And how much did you invest?
Moreover, I'd like to note another point, and once again, I got firmly convinced that everything was right. Well, meaning...
The right choice.
Yes. I've been an entrepreneur throughout my life, meaning always in business.
An experienced one, let's say.
Right. I do have an idea how to allocate money. So a part of the money was allocated precisely for development. And it was 60,000 at that time. And when we met...
You had collected it somewhere by Carol singing.
Yes. Well, I do understand that people were attracted by the amounts, of course. Well, that was just a part, a small part, and the person told me, that is, I didn't voice this amount, but the person declared it to me. He said, well, if you have 50 to 60,000, we can start a company. And I, that is consciousness, immediately thought, this is another tick. I mean, reading my thoughts, naturally, that's how my consciousness imagined it.
Well, many people actually believe if a person is spiritual, he must read thoughts. He must see all this. He must do this, too. He sees right through anyone. Well, a spiritual person has nothing better to do than to look right through.
You don't want to see yourself through sometimes.
That's what I'm talking about.
Right.
It's disgusting even to look in a mirror, not to mention looking into someone else's, right?
Right. So that was one more point. We actually started a company, and I'd like to note an interesting point which occurred in this entire business, in quotes. For me, business is about money, making money, meaning there is an action and there is a result.
Well, how can it be otherwise? Of course.
Yes, here...
Business is business.
Of course.
Like it or not, but everything living, everything material here must eat. It must get dressed. Therefore, one has to earn money. One has to go to work.
Naturally. Moreover, I really had good intentions to help the movement. That is, I knew that it's a volunteer movement, so I sincerely...
By the way, I've got a question. Has anyone from the movement asked you for money, ever?
Certainly not. It's a volunteer movement, and everyone here is by their own choice, yes.
And that's the point.
So I really had a sincere desire to earn.
To take part.
To take part the way I can. I mean, making money has always been an easy thing for me. And that was the least I could actually give. Right. And if we go back to how our joint business was developing, so for me, it's always been like this. I do something, I get the money, and I move forward. While here, it was presented as follows, that I should be a little behind him. And we would act a bit differently. And after some time, I actually grasped it very fast that he wasn't a businessman. In what sense? There were no actions. There was always some sort of expectation, like now something is going to happen.
Right now it would happen.
Yes.
Now we would earn a lot of money.
Yes.
But at the same time, nothing was being done.
Nothing. There were just talks.
But you had to be behind him.
Yes, there is an intention. And why behind him? Well,
For him to be the boss.
Well, yes. And the main thing why? Because why do you need to earn that much?
But you two were not earning yet, were you?
Well, it was already said. Why do you need to earn that much if all of us are heading for the spiritual? And we will spend this money 50-50. This means we give 50 to the coordination center, to Allatra IPM, right?
May I ask a question? Did you give at least a cent to the coordination center?
Of course not.
Well, I'm just asking this because people will think that everyone works, makes money, and brings it to the coordination center. Also, why am I saying this? Because people often ask questions, where does Allatra get money from? Allatra has no money. People have money. Well, judging by the chain here, you might know who has it, right? Well, and others of this kind. Say, we get together and do something. We work, we earn and do something. This money can be, well, someone who lives a different lifestyle can waste it in a restaurant. Someone can spend it elsewhere, while we spend it on doing something good. After all, this feels nice, right? But I'm saying this because from Olya's story, people might get an idea that we have plenty of businessmen here who just keep bringing money in. No, guys. The one who earns is the one who spends. If you have a desire to do something, go ahead and do it, right? I mean, this is the simplest variant.
This is really so.
Yet many people say, and this is not the first story, we've heard a lot of them, that let's earn for the coordination center, for the movement. Well, this is just like in this case.
And this is done for the sole purpose of exploiting the participants of our movement.
Well, and for one's own gain.
This happens often. Now we will start a company. There's the movement. And the most interesting thing is that for some reason even, let's say, participants of our movement believe or perceive, although not everyone, but some of them, who are way too smart and cunning, similar to our mutual fellow whom Olya and I have been talking about, that people can be exploited. Since they are so kind and good, it means they are, let's say, stupid, and will be, they are far from being stupid. I don't know anyone here in the movement who doesn't have a higher education, right? The rest have degrees and everything else. All people here are actually well educated, smart, and most of them are in business, so such geese won't fly up.
Well, and then, if you're in business, you count money very well. You can earn and...
Sure, and you understand exactly.
Of course. You know exactly how much money you can give away.
And you won't become anyone's slave.
Naturally. Of course.
Unless you get duped and drawn into a sect. Isn't it so?
Certainly, but this is...
Since this may not be done in the Allatra movement, hence, what do? We establish a separate sect.
Separate.
After all,
of course,
there are many cases like this, and we should say in the movement it often happens as well. People organize closed groups, they learn some secrets, while in actual fact the issue is banal, power and money. Well, from those whom they have pulled away from the movement. Why? Well, I'm saying again, Allatra is that spiritual and good which is there. Everything is simple and honest here. Well, and how can one approach a person who openly lives by the spiritual world and draw him into foolishness, into magic, or anything else? Well, that cannot happen. Whereas when beginners come, something else, that person runs into them, or a person got lost in his own consciousness, or problems arise, just like Lilia was telling. In this case, it's always possible to explain this, especially if a person is wearing a cassock, as he is respectable. Well, he is perceived differently. and they start telling something, or as many people also boast, saying, "We know Andre. We've been filmed in videos with him many times. That was shown. Have you seen it? I've seen." Well, there you go. You see, we drink tea with him every day, so I know secret technologies and techniques. Have you heard about Galiars? I have. So we're going to start teaching you now. Come here and open your wallet. Well, such situations did happen. Perhaps they even might still happen somewhere. So, if you are watching this, if you've got into such situations as Olya is describing, then what I'd like to say right away, guys, the exit from any sect, from anywhere, is free. Just tell them to get lost. Just slam the door behind you and go home. Adhere to God. Adhere to that purity which is embedded in all religions. Adhere to your inner, pure perception. Don't dream of magic, and don't wish for more than you are given. Something greater has to be earned, and then everything will be fine. Then nobody will pull you into any sect, nor take away what you have earned so hard, and so on. And everything will be fair and good. If you want to pray, go to a temple and pray. This is the best way, right?
Definitely. So, we worked together, but again, how did we work? We did nothing. And for me, this...
I beg your pardon. How could you be businessmen and do nothing?
Well, I was so surprised about that. I'm actually a very active person, particularly in terms of money, meaning if I need money, I just go and earn it. Everything is very fast.
How can it be otherwise? Of course.
Meaning it's not a process stretched in time, but it's a very quick process, and I'm sort of used to living like this. Well, here...
So it appears that he didn't let you earn money.
Certainly. Well, we accidentally did earn some money. Again, it was...
Was it a lot, at least?
A situation...
No, for tax authorities, no need to say. Was it substantial?
Well, yes.
Let's put it this way.
Well, yes.
There was something to share.
There was something to split.
There was something to split. How did you split it?
Well, how did we split it? Just like my former business partners. You do the work and we split between three.
Really?
That's how it was.
Between three? What do you mean between three?
No, that was there with other partners.
Not there. But how did you split it here?
Here we split in the same way. I did the work, whereas...
How exactly? How much of the given amount, and did you get, and how much did he get?
Well, there was a letter written from the church.
Right. And everything went to the church, while the church is him.
Of course. We kindly ask you to transfer such and such amount every month, so there has to be a ground for banks.
And did he transfer anything to the church?
No, it was me who transferred. I transferred money every month from the company.
To his church, where he's a dean.
Surely.
Meaning to him.
Well, surely.
And he was getting it.
Of course.
And you?
And I had money anyway.
What do you mean, anyway?
It's a solely female case. When you know, like in that anecdote, she says, "I even sold my hat to make you happy." This really applies to that situation.
I see. So you didn't earn anything, but you were only spending your own
right.
and giving the money to him.
Right. That's how it was.
Generally speaking, you worked. But in actual fact, were you the one who earned?
Naturally.
And he was spending.
Sure.
Everything is fair.
Those were my connections, my earnings, that is my business.
I've got it. Everything's fair.
Of course. Everything's fair. It's all fair.
He gets the money and you get the work.
Of course.
So, how did this business of yours turn into a totalitarian sect?
Okay, so naturally, once again, we're not analyzing the person, we're analyzing the system.
And what does the person have to do with this? He's a good guy.
Yes, we are analyzing the system, how the system always acts, basically.
Of course, anyone can happen to be in his place. This is true.
Of course.
To blame him for this, I'll put it simply. He's just an old child. He's actually an old man already. But inside, as I've said, he remains a child. And the system manipulates him. Envy and thirst for money have simply prevailed in him. The man never lived well off in the literal sense of the word. Really well off. But naturally, he didn't know how to work. He never had a decent business. He doesn't know how to earn, and so on. That's why he joined the church, so as not to do anything. No kidding. Well, he tried to fulfill himself somehow, to find something. And what did he always think of? There is such an expression, a freebie. So he always wished for freebies, to turn up somehow. And many people live like that. Many people hope that tomorrow something will turn up, something will fall down on them. that someday he will win a lottery somewhere, or they will turn up a grandpa millionaire who will die in time and leave him inheritance, or he will meet such a kind lady on his way. Well, that's how people live, so he shouldn't be blamed. This is just a game of consciousness. He yielded to the situation, but again, these were the same directives. They were also from consciousness. However, it's bad that he didn't go deeper into religion. Why? He's basically a priest of 3 churches, I believe, right?
Yes, of 3 churches.
These are
Greek Catholic,
Autocephalous,
and also
Ukrainian Orthodox Church of the Kiev Patriarchate.
Rites of the Kiev Patriarchate.
Well, as far as I know, they fired him, just like you. But you were fired for making competition, while he was fired exactly for inaptitude, as one of the priests said, who was of a higher rank. But this doesn't matter. Any conflict could have arisen there. This is not to blame him. In actual fact, the man is very sociable, normal, and nice to talk to. Let's put it this way. I always considered him my friend, and I still consider him so, despite the fact that he is fooling around. This is just consciousness, and consciousness is capable of leading anyone astray. Let's say, the devil knocked down even stronger Bogartiers, and the question is, what Satan's plans are when he fights for such people and confuses them, and forms, so to say, certain groups similar to yours. As a rule, these are long-term goals, but these are the goals of the system itself. While people don't know this, after all, he didn't know where such cravings came from. Well, let's say for the insatiable thirst for money and this exorbitant pridefulness. After all, he hadn't had it before, but then it suddenly appeared, and you saw yourself how his pridefulness was growing. This is really so.
Those were like 2 different persons.
Absolutely different.
In the very beginning, he was a good man.
But he is still good. It's just the system took control over him.
Right.
This is really so. This is another illustrative example of how a person can get carried away by a quick profit and magic instead of simply learning and working with sleeves rolled up, just like we do here. But during our time free from this work, we actually work at other jobs. And this is normal. Who doesn't work at 2 or 3 jobs? Well, isn't it so? Let's say there was just a desire, but at the same time this desire was coming and being imposed pathologically too. And we could see how he was changing.
Certainly.
I still wouldn't blame him, let's say, as a human being, as personality. He isn't right because he yielded, and he simply lost his Armageddon at this stage. But it's not a fact that he still has a chance ahead of him, and who knows how it will be. After all, only the one who hasn't fallen down doesn't rise, isn't it so?
This is true.
This is a good example. It's a very illustrative example for other people. And your example, I believe, is also remarkable. Tell us so that we know it, and don't act like this.
Okay, as for the business, it was all over, nothing. And generally speaking, it was already useless. And at that very time, talks began that we needed to form a group.
What kind of a group?
It would be great to form a group solely of women, mostly of young girls.
I'll give an example. Once we told about the Allat sisters. This was present in many religions. There were female groups. Those were God's ministers, priestesses. Well, there was a lot of them in various religions. Those were groups of females who devoted their entire lives to serving God. They were living, let's say, only by this completely. And they were bringing this Allat, these God's powers. They were bringing them into the world. There was even a time when the Allat sisters ruled the whole world. And that was a millennium. As they say, the golden millennium, when there was the rule of the spiritual. Indeed. And there were no wars, nothing. And in history, if we delve into it, well, I do understand that historians will say, when? Tell us. Let's take a look. at a little bit earlier times, at what is concealed behind modern history, the way it has been written, and we will see that it did take place. That very Allat sign was spread all over the world as long as 12,000 years ago, and much earlier. And it is precisely one of the symbols. Well, this symbol was even before the Allat sisters, and before Hyperborea. But in any case, it was their symbol too, just like of many other religions that embodied exactly the spiritual nature. Why have I told you all this? Because the establishment of an alternative female group of some kind implied true service to God. I believe so, except that in this case,
Right.
it was a little...
It was presented exactly this way.
It was told so.
Naturally. Right.
It's the highest degree of service,
The highest degree of service.
which can exist in this world.
Girls were selected, all young ones,
Clever.
clever, with a potential.
What kind of potential? Financial or spiritual potential? Well, not spiritual. Here, most likely.
There was a potential.
Or sexual. Let's call things for what they are.
Right, I just wanted to say it was actually 3 in 1, a full package. There was a spiritual potential and a financial potential and naturally a sexual potential.
And you say he's an untalented businessman.
Certainly not.
He's a far-seeing man.
Of course.
He immediately decided, why work if I can take everything in package?
Sure.
Young, talented, with money, why work?
Naturally.
Some people are lucky.
Yes. Basically, a group was formed. In the beginning, it was cheerful, nice, and calm, meaning
Well, we won't go into details. Let's say sex wasn't the last thing.
sex was the first thing. Now I actually want to proceed to...
But he is pretty old.
But consciousness doesn't distinguish whether you're a child or quite mature. And it is actually consciousness that plays. So basically, the main quality, which, as it seems to me, the person had, was sex for profit. And I'd like to say that in this case, if speaking of myself as well, I want to say that like attracts like. And it couldn't be otherwise in this case. And if we speak of my motives, if we look deeper and face the truth, look into the very depths of this whole conflict...
The truth, because lies are inappropriate here.
Surely. It was also sex for profit. Another thing is that I wasn't interested in money in this case. In terms of profit, I was interested in attention, status, and the image which was presented.
The alpha female.
Naturally.
You are the first one next to the very him.
Of course.
Who was presented as an authority who possessed some mighty superpowers.
Yes, that's true. To be honest, that was really so.
Well, and how can it be otherwise?
This is really so.
If, as they say, we lie, then why have we gathered here?
Certainly.
The whole point is honesty.
Certainly. So like always merges with like. As soon as you stop being alike, you will start getting out of this. For as long as you are alike, you will always be with such people. Going back to that question when guys were asking about groups, you said it quite correctly. A group is you.
Of course.
This is really so.
And it cannot be otherwise.
What is inside you determines what kind of people will be around you, what talks you will have.
After all, what is the point? Let me interrupt you. It is certainly much easier to engage in spiritual development. It's a joint practice. That's why people form certain groups and practice together. That is why in religions people get together as well. That's the point. After all, precisely, spiritual experience should be multiplied and it should be shared. However, unfortunately, the system itself exploits this, too. And now we observe, thanks to Olya and her sincere story, how everything gets twisted, how plus is changed to minus, how spiritual aspiration is replaced with trite human aspirations and desires. Desires to appear, but not to be, to appear, but not to exist, to hope, but not to have, isn't it so?
Surely.
And this very hope that you will have it.
Hope.
It exactly predominates. Well, there is a simple question. Didn't you feel that it was all lies, trickery?
I'll speak about myself.
Of course, about yourself.
I always felt it.
And what did you all do in that group? Well, besides sex. This is personal. Let's say it doesn't concern us. What was the point of your group? What was its purpose? After all, groups are formed for something. Well, there are cases when people just get together to engage in the spiritual. While you, as I understand, had a closed group, it was sort of a sect.
Right.
A sect under his control. It's a
Right.
paradox. A priest established a sect for money, meaning he was getting money for it.
At first, everything was more or less correct. Let's say we studied Allat, we practiced Allat. That is, in the beginning, everything was quite
Allat was also studied.
naturally. In the very beginning, yes, for you were supposed to swallow what consciousness offers you, right? This shouldn't repel you, in fact. For you, it should be.
And I have a simple question. Does he know Allat? Just honestly.
I think he doesn't.
A simple question. You've said that you know the Bible well. I know that you know it. Does he know it?
Well, we argued about certain points.
With the priest of 3 churches.
Yes. It's just the reason why I know the Bible is because for me it was vitally important at some point of time.
Why am I asking this question? Because the system always covers up. It won't let a person study the Bible deeply. And Allat all the more. Why? So that the person wouldn't get imbued with the essence. And then it's easier to manipulate him. When a person is pure inside, the system won't enter because he doesn't need that.
And the starting point of understanding that it was going in the wrong direction was the question, why should we gather at the coordination center? We should find some other place.
One more thing. It's a very important point. After all, those, let's say, little groups of people who try to learn something, people get together. Sometimes it happens that their leader, the authority whom they themselves nominate. After all, people themselves create authorities. Well, isn't it so?
For sure.
They have elected him and believe that he's an authority, and they listen to him. Even realizing that he is wrong, they still listen to him. And far and wide, such authorities say, no one needs to go to the coordination center. Stop talking to people from the coordination center.
They isolate a person like a sheep from a herd.
That's right, right. And precisely.
It's a standard move of the system, unfailing at all times.
And it works.
Absolutely.
After all, the same happened in religions too.
Of course.
Don't go to church. Come to my hut. For the priest says wrong things there while I know better.
Sure.
And so they established
Here I will
sects.
tell you straight, okay?
Of course.
Here I will tell you straight, while in everyone's presence I cannot tell this. Well, meaning,
Besides,
and also,
it is all shrouded in a mystery of some secret knowledge, as if he knows something special.
of course.
He knows great secrets, which he'll teach you.
Well, miracle, secret, authority, these are basically the 3 pillars.
He also told you about miracles, didn't he?
Certainly.
Did he show you anything? Well, he's a miracle himself. I understand.
He didn't show us anything. Yes, and the first signal, basically that caused among everyone in the group, another thing is that I'll speak for myself. For as long as it is beneficial to you and you want to act within certain limits of some pattern, consciousness covers up some inconvenient points.
It smooths out and justifies.
It smoothes out, erases, and just a little so that you don't worry much. And despite the fact that it caused some sort of rejection then, as I remember, at the same time, we all agreed.
Well, why rejection? Because let's say we are well informed about that. And in any case, we know most of the participants of this sect quite well. These are really wonderful, talented, and sensible girls. They are truly good, open, and sincere. However, it happens so that consciousness has played a mean joke on them. It told them that they would learn something mysterious and great. Just that.
But the implication was positive: we will serve people.
Serving people.
This is also an unfailing method of the system. Higher goals.
At the beginning of the program, when we were talking about astral journeys and magicians, I said right away, when someone offers something, ask him to show it first. Let him show what he's capable of. If they talk about serving people, Ask them to show what their service to people consists in. And here everything falls in its place. The one who indeed doesn't lie will show that.
While the one who won't show it,
I recommend you to turn around and never trade God for an illusion. Never. As a matter of fact, magic and doing magic are a straight path to subpersonality, unequivocally. But as far as I understand, we are just coming up to the practices you were performing and to what he was teaching you. Well, that will be interesting. For people's understanding, I mean.
We left the coordination center, that is, we were gathering at the place of one of the girls, and we basically gathered at home of each of us by turns. Well, it was actually far from spiritual. Why? The priority was a lot of food, first of all, and this always baffled me.
Well, the priest likes to eat.
He does. And it's the point when insatiability has two daughters, give, give, like it is written in parables in the Bible. This part worked continuously and in everything. Meaning, at first, there was always a lot of food. Then, once we were full, we could exchange a word or two, something like, so what's in Allatra there? Well, I mean in the book. Literally, it's...
So you left Allatra, but continued studying Allatra.
Yes, of course. Well, that was no longer a study. We mostly discussed books. I won't name the authors of these books now. Nowadays, these are trendy books about astral journeys, projections, lucid dreams, basically.
Meaning those far from spiritual, from the Bible and the Quran.
Almost everyone has read them. They're very trendy nowadays.
But did you study them?
Yes, we studied them. That is, some separate points were taken.
Practices.
Practices, yes. And we started doing the practices presented there. And hence, our goal was, at least as it was presented, that everybody has their own abilities and talents. For instance, someone can see through the walls. I'm just saying it as an example. Someone else can move some items. The third one can have an impact on a human.
Okay, may I ask you a simple question? After all, when people really serve, it's clear that a certain subdivision takes place. Well, let's say Galiars and all others, meaning those who really serve, have their own units that are being formed. This is natural and normal. Why? Both in a regular army and in the spiritual one. Angels, servicemen, Galiars, and all the rest are split into some units. It's clear that some have certain greater abilities in something, as you have said. Yet, what did you want to use those abilities for? There has to be an explanation. A person sacrifices his life. He sacrifices it in the name of God, for the sake of service, in the name of people. He doesn't just strive for God, but he gives up the material world if he embarks on the spiritual path. However, in this case, it turns out to be a little vice versa, judging by what you... But that's not the point. He refuses. He chooses the service. It's clear that he has to take care of the body for as long as he is in it, but all his time he devotes to the service in some errands. Yet, for a person to embark on this path, to bear these unbelievable, preterhuman loads, he must know the ultimate purpose of using these. What was being told to you?
Yes, and here there are 2 points
Why move anything and look through walls?
which must be touched upon. The first is... I want to laugh. Excuse me.
Well, share, please. We want to laugh too.
Yes. So there were some printed sheets. Well, as I imagined, like manuscripts, there has to be some sort of mystery. How can it be without mystery? No way.
Well, yeah.
Basically, the rules of Galiors were printed on those sheets of paper and as the Galiors Code of Honor.
Wait, stop.
Which was not included in the Azosmus book.
So it turns out you were Geliars.
Well, of course, there must be a higher goal.
Haha. Even
Well,
so,
sure.
you even came to such an
Well,
understanding.
of course, naturally.
And why not the Allat sisters? Why take just Geliars?
Well,
He
apparently,
didn't grow up to that.
the person didn't have enough knowledge. And the next thing which I'd like to mention is
There was a code, a set of certain rules which you had to
so we were reading them.
reading the code.
We took turns reading them, and we had to agree with it.
Well, guys, to be honest, I took some interest in history, the history of Geliarship, and it's the first time I hear about the code which one can read.
Well,
Not live by it, but read it.
that's why I wanted to laugh. It was presented as some copied secret manuscripts. Well,
Yes, these are details.
this doesn't matter anymore.
These are details. A simple question. What did you have to develop your superpowers for?
Yes, just a moment. We're getting to it now. I just want to speak about one more very important point.
Okay.
So, when we came close to the point that we had to practice that, the system naturally first needed to convince us, hence, we were reading the Code of Geliars. And next, we were asked a question which all of us had 24 hours to think about. The question was the following: what do you have to sacrifice in order to become
A Geliar?
right?
What do you have to sacrifice in order to become a Geliar?
Yes, exactly. We were not allowed to talk to each other, meaning to discuss this topic. Why? Everyone had to come to a conclusion on their own. And one girl expressed a thought which was actually later on presented by him as, I'd like to say that the person never had anything of his own, even thoughts. He was always guided by someone else's.
It's the person whom we are talking about.
Yes, sure.
Well, let's call him Father, okay? We have already said that he's a clergyman. No names.
And it was suggested, well, to be honest, it was a shock. I'm talking about how the personality was disagreeing with it all. Do you know what the answer was? You have to sacrifice your personality.
Well,
Precisely, the personality is a spiritual being.
if you distort, then you distort.
To the utmost. Why? Because a little distortion doesn't usually impress.
After all, look, the system was actually talking to you. All of you who went there, many of you were familiar with various religions,
course.
with Allatra and so on, and you were aware of what the human spiritual component is and what Allatra is.
Sure.
And how could you sacrifice personality? How could you sell or trade God? For what? If you serve him.
Of course.
And if he was saying that Geliars, yeah, who are Geliars?
Warriors of light, God's warriors.
These are God's warriors. Right. So it turns out, does this mean that if a person becomes a God's warrior, he should betray God?
Yes.
And your consciousness didn't object, did it?
No, personally, I had a terrible.
And inside,
There was a terrible conflict due to this entire affair. To be honest, at that time I was mentally unstable due to everything that was happening. Well, that was a terrible experience because
the essence was being ruined.
the essence was being ruined, and I'd like to
But
say...
just look, after all, a desire.
Of course.
Desire to dominate and to be an alpha female.
It prevailed over that truth which the personality felt.
To what extent?
While the personality felt one thing, rejection and a desire to run away from that
But to run
person,
away.
not just to walk away,
Of course.
but exactly to run away and immediately.
However, consciousness was holding and dominating.
Consciousness was holding.
How strong pridefulness is, in fact.
Very strong. Basically,
This is a good example for people, not to think that consciousness is weak. No, guys, consciousness is very strong. Behind consciousness, consciousness is a part of the system, while the system is this whole world that has billions of years of history and has seen such beings as you, as us, many times.
Yes, this is true.
That's why we mustn't play with it.
And now we're approaching the answer why, meaning to the question which you've asked, why did you need these abilities? What was all this for?
Well, why? Right? Both to betray God and to betray personality, to trade yourself and the whole life. For what? What should you actually do if you don't serve God?
The first thing was to protect the leaders of Allatra IPM. Well, I understand that it's ridiculous. Now it is really ridiculous. However,
Well, as far as I understand, to protect him in the first place.
well, it wasn't put this way. Rather, other people were mentioned, whom,
I'll put it straight, me.
of course.
Yes, it's a secret group which was supposed to protect me, right?
Well, of course.
I was presented as the leader.
Well, naturally, meaning anyway.
You know, I will say honestly, now we encounter different people who have left. Thank God. Various sects. And we are simply amazed. Well, I've really seen a lot in my life, and I've heard a lot. However, when sects are established, and their goal is, it's in addition to sex and money, which are surely everywhere. But the main goal is to rescue the Mother of God from captivity. This is, how is that?
To protect God.
Protect God. Well,
God cannot cope with it himself.
God cannot cope with it himself.
Well, of course.
And it turns out that a small group of people has gathered who, pardon me, I'll put it straight, screw like rabbits, bring all their money to their leader, and by this, they are helping.
Yes.
He cannot cope with it, and they are saving him.
They are not just helping, but precisely saving him.
They are saving God because the devil has become stronger. And the funniest thing is that people believe in this. You see, they've been trained to such an extent. Consciousness has made people, so to say, so stupid that they believe in fairy tales. And very many things are filled with fairy tales. Not only sects, but also people believe in fairy tales. They feel and understand, but they don't trust what they feel. You've now told us a good example, Olya, right? You felt that you should run away.
Precisely run. And I'm saying at that time, I was mentally unstable. It was due to the inner conflict, meaning I was constantly
It's natural that there was an inner conflict.
having hysterics and depression.
Well, how can you not be in depression when personality aspires to one thing, while consciousness forces you to obey and to fulfill something else? Generally speaking, this is exactly that very totalitarianism. What kind of totalitarianism is it? It is idiocy. Idiocy not in a person, not in leaders of sects or someone else. It's idiocy in consciousness itself. That's where it is terrible. It's terrible that people lose faith in themselves, that they can slam the door behind them. Tell this jerk to get lost. Pardon me for being blunt. And start living peacefully. After all, yes, this world is hideous. It is material. But it's hideous and material, coarse, bad, and full of spite, just because we are making it like that. However, we can build a wonderful world as well, and after all, indeed, there was a spiritual reign in history. It's 1,000 years when there were no wars. Well, we don't need to go far. Even when there was the Trillian culture, there were no wars. And historians cannot attribute this to fairy tales anymore, for it's a fact. Over that period of time, no evidence of any battles or anything else, or of any internal conflicts was ever found. There weren't any. People lived by the spiritual. That's why, in fact, Allat was depicted everywhere. Let's say, in our Tripilia and on the American continent and in other territories of that time. And no traces of any military or conflict situation were found anywhere. No weapons, nothing. They were unnecessary because people had God's love, and they had peace in their soul and peace in consciousness. But nowadays, consciousness has gained strength, and what we encounter in the 21st century goes beyond the limits of idiocy to save God. Well, okay, let's finish with this. Let's go on. The main goal was rescuing. I see. Such hidden warriors. And what did you learn?
Well, now...
What did he teach you? After all, he's a leader. He must teach something.
Well, he precisely taught nothing because there was basically nothing to show, and so...
Meaning he didn't know how to do anything.
He didn't know how to do anything.
But he forced you to learn by books.
He forced and...
By books, on astral projections, on magic, on everything else.
Yes, exactly. And generally speaking, demonstration was welcomed of what each of us could do or who achieved what. Demonstration.
So, did you demonstrate?
to a greater or lesser extent.
Some extrasensory manifestations.
Some extrasensory ones. Those who consider themselves more spiritual used to say, well, I can do that anyway, so I don't have to demonstrate
Well,
it.
exactly. Those who can do nothing say so, don't they?
Right. Well, who was less spiritual just demonstrated that because the power of attention was invested, hence a person got
Well,
it.
the system comes into action. It's clear that there's nothing in it,
There was
right?
sort of nothing astonishing, let's say, or supernatural. Absolutely nothing. And here, I'd like to note the next two steps or stages. So I was dismissed from the alpha female position. This is a very interesting and indicative moment.
But how did you let that happen?
Yes, I exactly want to proceed to this now. Actually, what is written in Allatra...
May I ask you earlier?
Go ahead.
For you have moved to Allatra, and that's it. Is she richer than you?
At that moment, she was. I didn't have that much money anymore.
That's the answer.
Well, that was clear.
And younger.
Well, naturally.
Younger and richer.
Of course. It couldn't have been otherwise, so I'd like to say...
Dear ladies, if you follow the path of an alpha female, listen to Olya's advice.
Right. Sooner or later, you will play a secondary role.
Save money because you'll need more of it as you grow older.
Right. And by the way, I was the oldest in the group. By the way, there is also such a point, as it was presented, why young girls are needed. They have more Allat powers, a greater return can be obtained, while such women as me, who are older than 30, so to say, are less efficient and
not so sexy.
Here, sort of, let's say, not so much can be taken in every sense of this word.
Sure. Moreover, he had already ripped you off.
Yes. And so, this point of imposition that one should always comply with some image. Why have I touched upon the subject of Allatra? How important the knowledge described in Allatra is. Why? Indeed, like unites with like. If one of your essences is active, the left or the right one, this gets invariably and immediately launched in your group, in people who don't work on themselves. And this very mechanism was launched, rivalry in everything. And basically, he precisely urged us, compete. Who is better? Who is more beautiful? Who is taller? Who is slimmer? Who has more abilities? And I'll observe that. And at that point, as I understand, the system is like planning for years. And it's very pragmatic, even if you don't catch these points. Perhaps he didn't even catch this point that it was planned for a long time ahead.
Well, of course.
Moreover,
after all, it turns out that the system established a sect to counterbalance something. Hence, it expects its growth for many years of existence and as an alternative of development in the opposite direction. It's always like this.
And there is also another moment here why one of the points was basically naturally money prevailed, and so he needed to replace me with another female who could bring and give more. And along with that, by that time, the inner conflict had grown to such an extent in me that I could no longer be silent. So at all our meetings, I started saying aloud and voicing, "Something is wrong, guys."
Meaning you began to understand that it wasn't right.
I understood it previously too.
Well, understanding.
Another thing is that I started talking about it.
Voicing it.
Yes, I started voicing it. Specific points, specific ones. Don't you feel something is wrong? There is no that love. There is no this. There is no even that peace, not to mention love.
Something greater.
There is just no peace. You are permanently in some rivalry and pursuit that now something will happen. That's an interesting point in communication with this man. I think if we asked the girls, they experienced the same thing. However,
I believe we will have such an opportunity.
A moment, right?
Because not only you are awakening, another thing is that they might get frightened, ashamed, and fall silent. But they are experiencing the same thing as you were experiencing. After all, many have grown smarter and have run away. Whereas those who have to be next to him, well, These are several people. I believe they are experiencing the same thing. But where can they settle him? The man has no place to live. He's simply homeless, beggarly,
Right.
old,
He's literally like a burden hanging on
like
you.
a backpack.
Precisely hanging.
And here they might also have a feeling that they cannot abandon him just because of this. But I think
Just to abandon.
the time will come. They are good people. After all, sobering up will come after any drunken feast.
This is true.
Even after this one, I believe we will still be able to hear their revelations and insights. It would be great, of course, and wonderful to hear him as well, if he eventually sobers up. After all, those were foolish things which his consciousness was doing while manipulating him. He himself is actually, and you have said this in the beginning, as a person he is good.
For sure.
He is just a big child who's got lost in broad daylight. He wanted something bigger, wanted to have everything, and he sold himself for, well, as they say, he sold his soul to Satan, right? Well, this is such a general expression, but in actual fact, this is really so.
Well, there are
He
also
just got
several
lost.
important points always during communication with this person, especially when this group was already developing. Basically, even from the beginning, if I analyze and if I'm honest, this was from the very beginning, basically as soon as we got acquainted. However, it certainly aggravated later on in the course of our communication.
What exactly?
Always in communication with this person, sort of a hole was felt. It seemed like he devoted time to me. He sort of talked to me even about spiritual matters. We seemed to have fulfilled some actions together with this person. We went somewhere or we met with someone, for instance, but sort of
Emptiness.
there was always this emptiness.
And it's also paradoxical that not only you, but many people said this. While he was sitting next to me, we talked, the man in a cassock. I have known him for a long time, so to say, and so on. I have normal relations with him. He's a person who is pleasant to talk to. But again, I emphasize, to talk to communicate, not more. Pardon me for the joke. The point is that people also started raising questions that he's empty inside.
Right.
But this is true. How couldn't you feel that?
No, the thing is that it was felt very strongly, that's why. After all, I'll say once again, this inner conflict of mine developed into permanent Armageddon, and it continued 24 hours a day for several months in succession. That is, obviously, I saw and felt something different. But inside, I understood that it was totally unacceptable for me. And I'll go back to honesty again, just as you say, that's right. One should be honest with oneself.
First and foremost.
But I wanted to reaffirm my alpha female status regardless of anything. And so I was actually reaffirming it.
You wanted this more than God's love, earthly amenities.
Of course. No. I wanted earthly amenities. I wanted to be the alpha female. If we look deep into this, it was sex for the sake of profit, that's all.
Absolutely right.
Indeed, there was nothing more in that.
To put it simply, you traded the spiritual path for magic.
Exactly.
Well, and what's the verdict?
The verdict is terrible. There are also other points which I'd like to voice. It's a violation of all moral and ethical values. It seems like, any person, if we go outside and see a child hitting a dog with his foot, for instance, anyone would be horrified. Why? You wouldn't even have a flow of thoughts for 20 years ahead. He'll grow up and become a murderer. No, it's just that everyone would go out and see that this isn't normal.
Well, certainly this isn't normal.
Well, and one would come up and, let's say, reprove the child, or would come up to his parents and say...
Well, even if he didn't come up, he would at least feel that this isn't normal.
This isn't normal.
He wouldn't agree in this
well,
case.
Here, it was precisely a violation.
Did he teach that? Here, yes? You were saying,
yes,
here it was.
There was a violation of moral and ethical values under the slogan, for spiritual development, it's not important what you do in three-dimensionality. And it launched a total mechanism of this, let's say, hatred to everything around. And that is, I tried several times.
All sins were sort of forgiven to you in advance, right?
Right. This very point,
Well, after all, you were Geliars.
At some point, when in various ways I tried
To resist.
to resist it. Yes, I mean,
I wonder, what was his reaction?
that's what I actually want to say now. So we got into the car. There were three of us, the already dominating alpha female, he and I.
The other one was there.
Naturally, there were three of us. That's why it is actually demonstrative. And there was always sort of a tease. That is, I was constantly in a terrible depressive state and was always silent. Well, I mean, this is totally unusual for both my character and my positive attitude to life.
I believe everyone has already understood this.
Yes, it's totally unusual, and this simply perplexed and astonished the person, and he was becoming indignant. He sort of wanted to knock me down with this all the time, and so he turned around and said with such a caustic smile, "So, how are you? Go ahead and tell us, why are you silent?" And I dared to open my mouth in a very rude manner. To that, then she left.
How could you open your mouth at your boss like that?
I've exactly wanted to proceed to this point now, meaning the inner conflict had already grown to such an extent that...
Direct confrontation began.
Right, direct confrontation began.
The conflict stepped over fear.
Yes, that was it.
And you should agree, you have kept this silent, but you had fear before him, didn't you?
Of course, sure.
And you've hushed this up, kept silent. You've been telling all of us that you had an interest to be an alpha female, to have sex for business. You were interested in controlling these silly girls and so on, next to such a priest, and everything else. Well, all this is kind of understandable. It's clear that you engaged in magic together because the man, not being aware of anything real, what can he give?
Only magic.
Right. Nonetheless, all of you had a great fear before him.
Yes, sure.
And this fear exactly comes from the system through consciousness. This is what forces one to obey. Isn't it so?
It is. It forces one to obey, and these moments of breakthrough, yes? And then again, there goes this...
Clarity.
Right.
Clarity of both perception and...
You must go to the stall again and remain in full obedience. And I'd like to finish this story. When I responded in quite a rude manner, this girl had already left the car, and the person turned around, pretended that, and said with a chuckle, "Why are you answering so rudely?" To which I said, "Well, you say that it's not important what one does in three-dimensionality, so reap what you have sown."
A good argument.
One must reap as one has sown. In response, there was a complete amazement. "I've provided you with all the benefits, and you are being so rude to me." However, that was already useless.
Wait, so he believes that he has provided you
all
with...
the benefits, yes. Moreover, the person...
Please, specify which ones. Which benefits did he provide you with?
His own presence.
And what else? Well, it's clear.
No.
An old sick body.
This is the main thing. This is the main thing.
Right, in sexual use for young girls. What else?
Well, the rest you have to understand yourself.
Well, all the benefits. What other benefits?
Well, all the benefits. All the benefits.
Is this all the benefits?
All the benefits. Exactly. I'd like to say that if we look...
So, okay. Let's pass this without jokes, because all this is too serious, and it's painful even to listen to it. I imagine how you were going through it all.
It wouldn't be so funny if all this is terrible. All this is terrible.
Idiocy was getting stronger.
Yes.
May I ask you questions? For instance, you were performing some magic, precisely magic actions. Was he defending? Have you heard from him that Satan is cool, that demons are great, that you should worship the devil? Well, I'll just put it simply.
Certainly not. Moreover, these moments of conflict arose in every person to a greater or lesser degree, meaning, generally speaking, I was the only one to have the courage to start speaking, to resist openly, and to be in total perplexity regarding what was actually happening. The girls are young, and they were kind of more loyal to this, let's say. And this very inner conflict, whether to serve the devil or not, how I'm answering your question now, that is, This topic was in the air. Something is wrong, and
Well, everyone knew that it was
we're
wrong,
going in the wrong.
that you were going in the wrong
Of
direction,
course, and a question was asked.
doing wrong things.
Yes, and a question was asked for reflection, namely, what is good and what is evil? Everyone could voice an answer taking turns.
The fact that you could. What was his verdict? What is good and what is evil? How did he explain that?
There is neither good nor evil.
So, any evil which you would do,
Yes.
it would be,
Well, there is neither good nor evil.
there is neither good nor evil.
There is neither good nor evil.
But-
So it's not important what you do in three-dimensionality.
and whom you worship and whom you serve.
Right. And for the girls, it was precisely.
Why am I saying this? If you and I talk now, I don't know whether it will be pleasant for our viewers, as well as for those who are present here to hear this. But when the system is working, and here the system was definitely working,
For sure.
because to take a person, let's say a clergyman, and to bring him into such a state when he organizes a sect and does hell knows what, and forces people, young and promising ones, to engage in magic when, well, this won't happen without the system. This is definitely its influence. Satan's hand can be traced here, so to say. No kidding. And it surely implants directives that the devil is good, and surely that demons are helpers. And what we call, so to say, bad, even in general human understanding, will always be distorted that it is positive. However, now you have already started confirming that it's not important what you do in this three-dimensionality.
Yes.
This doesn't have a special importance. But at the same time, you were promised that you would go to heaven since you were Galiars.
Naturally.
You were serving, you were defending. You had to study magic.
First of all, and so to this question, what's good and what's evil, the girl who at that moment occupied the alpha female position responded, meaning it was already surely in an authoritative manner for who was answering. It is not important what your actions look like in three-dimensionality, the main thing is whom you serve. And it seems to me that this very point gives an understanding to everything.
And at the same time, whom did you serve?
The system.
And whom did you serve as you believed? Did he say whom you served? Did he say that you served God?
Of course. Moreover, he himself explained when the question was asked who the archons were, who conducts were.
He cannot know this.
No, the answer was as follows. These are people who serve the devil. And there was a logical question. Yet any sensible person cannot choose to serve the devil. To which he said, well, in any sect, everywhere it is presented, and they've been told that they serve God. So, the system itself.
It is always joking.
Yes.
In actual fact, the system always
Of
talks about its
course.
plans, and it always has a great humor, and it makes fun of itself. This is true.
Right.
And so, if people begin to watch their consciousness and to observe it, and all this is visible, it always says what it thinks, what it wants to do to you and set you up for. It's just that one should learn to listen to all this.
100%. There is also.
Okay, never mind him. We've got it. It's just unpleasant. To be honest, I don't like all this dirt. Better tell us, how did you manage to escape from all that? Well, let's say, your Armageddon. What did it lead to? To what insight? To what essence? Just your understanding and your way out of this.
The first thing is what you say in all programs and what was used in the practice of any people who followed the spiritual path. The first thing was that I started writing everything down, and it was very important.
This is really important. Let me repeat once again for people. After all, consciousness is telling, don't write it down. You know and understand everything.
Right.
It's your experience too.
That's a big difference. When you know and understand something inside yourself and consciousness tells you, immediately erases it, immediately distorts and presents your thought to you in a different
Let's
way.
say, firstly, not your thought, but that thought which it has imposed on
Which
you.
it itself has presented.
Then it will itself turn it to another side and tell you that it's exactly so. However, when you write down everything just the way it goes, you just write it down.
Yes.
Then the next day or in a week, you'll be surprised at this while reading.
That's how it was, and I started writing everything down. And my first revelation was, let's say, It was in the middle of our group's path, meaning it was already clear back then. But as we say, consciousness gained
Fear.
the upper hand to such an extent that even this was rejected. So I wrote down a lot of points, what was suppressing me, why I was feeling so bad, why I was constantly in depression. And there was a point there.
This was actually retribution for magic.
Of course, it was retribution for magic.
Either an illusion or...
And there was a point there, and it was sort of between the lines. And when I reread what I had written, I got terrified with that truth, and I didn't want to accept it as the truth. And there was a point among everything that was annoying to me there, that I wasn't the alpha female, that I was
Well,
jealous.
this is pure psychology, that which hooks you up, but...
And if we look into the depths of it all, then there was a point which sounded as follows. I'm afraid to lose the person as a tool for achieving my own exaltation. That's it. Meaning it's not the person himself that I needed.
He was just a tool for you,
For my own exaltation.
who was exalting you in your own eyes and not in anyone else's.
In my eyes, in my own eyes, right. And this was really true. Well, everything else was superficial, just like we say psychology, all this is nothing.
All this is clear anyway, that the fight, the alpha female,
Right.
the competition, all this is baby talk.
This was the most important point. And even when I reread my records, I felt that it was the essence of the problem. However, at that time, I rejected it in principle.
And note, not the fact that you were engaged in magic, not the fact that you were doing stupid things.
Yes, but that I would lose something.
Not the fact that you, having stepped on the spiritual path, you turned away from it
Not
and started
this.
engaging in hell knows what. This is not what bothered you. Not the fact that you could become a subpersonality worried you. After all, magic is a straight path to subpersonality, but this didn't worry you, although you knew and felt this.
Of course.
But you were actually concerned about the fact that you could lose, so to say, a tool for self-exaltation.
Right. Well, serious work on myself and escape.
Question, was it you who was concerned or consciousness?
Consciousness. Consciousness plays with itself as it likes.
However, writing down thoughts from consciousness, it turns out that you can drive consciousness itself into a corner by means of that very consciousness.
If you are in a different position, but the position turned out to be anyway of the animal nature, and so even this point was ignored.
Dominance of a desire.
It was ignored. And insights that it was jealousy, that it was greed, and so on were brought to the forefront. However, without the essence.
And at that time, there was a play on spirituality.
Right.
Here's another example. I'm saying this for people. Don't play at spirituality. You should live by spirituality. Then both experience and understanding will come. And if a person really lives by spirituality, exactly by the true aspiration, without lying to oneself, then everything will be revealed, and everything will be comprehended. Whereas if a person plays at spirituality day after day, doing nothing at that, and only covering his low human desires with spirituality, like our main character in this case, the outcome will also be like this. He will have to endure a lot. But even having received some bonuses from the system here for serving Satan, he'll have to be responsible later on. This isn't intimidation, this is reality. And this reality of ours is more terrible than any intimidation. Subpersonality is the worst thing that can actually be. That is why here, pardon me, I have interrupted you.
Okay, and when serious work on myself began and escape, it's only when this extent of inner conflict reached its apogee, I couldn't live otherwise, meaning there was definitely an aspiration, an impulse to life.
Meaning you felt that you could actually lose life.
Yes,
And only then you started clinging to it.
yes, only then.
Understanding of life. Is it physical life or an understanding of the higher spiritual?
In this case,
Are we talking about life eternal or a combination of both?
it was a combination. At the same time, all diseases became aggravated. Doctors diagnosed me and said, "You have 3 weeks left to live. And generally speaking, it's surprising that you still walk. People with such indicators as you have are kept at resuscitation. We're totally astonished by the fact that you've come to the hospital on your own. And along with all that, this even no longer prevailed, meaning personality was striving for life, and I still believe and think, and I'm confident that a spiritual impulse was primary. I sort of had nowhere to retreat, so to say. And all that reached its apogee, so what did I start doing? The first thing I reread probably 20 times within one day how to perform the lotus flower practice, the lotus flower spiritual practice.
Meaning, not that lotus flower which.
Not that lotus flower, but the lotus flower described in Sensei Book 1 by Anastasia Novik. I reread it probably 20 times. I was reading and telling myself, everything is so simple, I just need to start doing this. I cannot say that before I didn't do it or didn't try. There is such a point, and it's really when demons play at spirituality. And it's a totally different thing when there is really an impulse from personality to life. I set myself a task, that's it, as it is written in the book. First, autogenic training, then meditation. And in the beginning, I started doing this, achieving. And precisely as you correctly said in the program questions and answers, this is very important because I tried it all on myself. There should be a ladder. If there is no this ladder, when you climb on a stair and you don't get down from it under any circumstances, all this turns into struggle and into laziness. As one of the participants asked a question then, why does laziness come? Because it's a play. Because you're not going, in fact.
Laziness is when there is a play.
Of course. The first thing was that I didn't decelerate from day to day. It could be 3 hours if needed. Luckily, at that time, I had sufficient time. The second point, it came kind of by itself, so to say. By reading every day, I set myself a task to read at least 10 times daily how to perform the lotus flower spiritual practice. And as a result of this relaxation, I started feeling this warmth in the middle of the solar plexus. And basically, I began to progress quite fast, despite the fact that...
Well, the most difficult thing is to rouse physical sensations.
Yes.
This has nothing to do with spirituality, but it's merely a point of concentration which we should start taking care of.
Of course.
It's the work of consciousness with consciousness that takes place in the lotus flower practice itself. These are the first little steps, until a person thus attains an understanding of what love is, until he reaches the highest. While everything begins with trite relaxation and attempts to feel at least a part of one's body.
Right. For instance, there is meditation. I recommend it. Concentration on the nose tip. It really solves many issues. Concentration of attention and of that very warmth and so on and so forth. Everything is actually very simple, and I just started doing it. At that moment, I no longer concentrated on my nose tip, which had been basically more or less mastered previously.
Let me interrupt you now. What does it do? Meditation exactly teaches that by means of his consciousness, a person can discipline consciousness. And later on, this gives an opportunity to study consciousness. Meaning, if a person who has no skills, no discipline of mind, so to say, approaches the point of studying himself, then there will be a play. Consciousness will play an evil trick on him, lead astray and say, why do you need this? Look at what a great computer game, or look at these pretty cats. And the person will get carried away by the cats and will forget about his spiritual. This is life.
And when I started doing it every day, immediately there arose this joy and this... I understood that I was living. At least I started living. It was also very important, as it is described in the Allat book on page 643, a sincere appeal to God. At that time, the program Life was released with your participation. In the literal sense of the word, for more than 3 months, 24 hours a day, I always had this program on my phone, on TV. On the internet, I visited YouTube, I visited Allat TV, and precisely 24 hours a day. At that time, it was just impossible to live any other way.
Well, it's hard to get rid of the dominant power of consciousness, certainly. Perhaps those were crutches, but in this case, it wasn't a crutch, but a life ring.
It was so important and it was so valuable. And the main thing in this program, I began to see for myself like further guidelines on the path.
Next steps.
Next steps. I was very inspired by this example which you gave, the one about Muhammad, when eyewitnesses of his life mentioned that he was precisely spending most of his time in spiritual practice.
Yes, in prayer, in the spiritual one.
This example became a part of me, so to say, to such an extent that
It should be a part of everyone.
I just had a desire to live exactly this way, and this video entitled Life was my prayer. Well, I mean, consciousness still attacked. Naturally, all methods, including secondary consciousness, were used, and the prayer sounded already differently. To live by the spiritual world. I want this, help me, I want to live by the spiritual world. It was a sincere appeal exactly to live. This very word to live, and this word life, is significant when you lose something. And in actual fact, very soon I started noticing points of precisely spiritual growth in myself. At the same time, I still continued communicating with these people, and I began to see as if my eyes opened. It seemed to be the same picture, but I understood what was behind it. And this very point in the video live, which you touched upon, was very important when you said the following. In spiritual practice, there shouldn't be a single thought. And whoever I communicated with at that time, those were basically people in this group, I started asking them, do you have thoughts in spiritual practice? And I faced a situation when there was just mumbling in response.
As a matter of fact, they simply didn't perform spiritual practices because it was impossible. Spiritual practices, first and foremost, purity. While purity doesn't tolerate dirt, spiritual practice is like the light. If we turn off the light now, darkness will fill the room. When there is darkness in people, it rules them. While spiritual practice is like the switched on light, in such a case, understanding would have immediately come to them, if at least once they performed spiritual practice as they should. The same insight would have come to them, the same insight as you got. They would have turned around and left, and they would have been near us now. Isn't it so?
So the next point in working on myself was like another step of a ladder. And I also started making sure that in spiritual practice, there shouldn't be a single thought. And here, other things began. Firstly, there was hunting for this warmth by consciousness, and that's a very interesting thing.
Consciousness was exactly supposed to distract you and to hunt for the material, but this has nothing to do with spirituality. However, consciousness was supposed to divert you exactly to physical sensations, to something like that, and to exalt this value, which is actually valuable at the first stage.
Sure.
While later on, this doesn't matter at all.
And for a long time, this point, well, firstly, by that time, I already kept away from everyone. By the way, I'd like to say that at this very time, when I started seriously engaging in spiritual development, I left the group for 2 months. I retreated totally. I stopped answering the phone. I terminated any contact. And here I revealed several very important observations for myself, which gave me an understanding of how to move further and what steps I had to take in order to get out of that. Firstly, when I retreated for 2 months and continued writing what was coming to my head, what kind of dreams I had, what images came to me,
how the system was attacking.
I was surprised that I didn't need to see these people. The movie was even cooler than when I saw them.
Of course. After all, it's actually not people who were holding you, not people were playing with you. Consciousness?
Yes.
The system itself. Let's say, through its demons, through your consciousness. It was exactly the one that was enslaving you. After all, no one can enslave a person if the person is free as a spiritual personality. But when a person as personality is a slave of consciousness, when consciousness dictates to him, then any, even small demon is a master for him. What can we say? And in this case, it is seen quite well. And it's not important whether they were near you or not. They were always with you.
Yes.
Because precisely consciousness is always with you. It's impossible to run away from it. It's impossible to hide. That's why, if a person has decided to step on the spiritual path, he shouldn't hide in the bushes. He should face the truth. And if you've started walking, then walk straight, and your steps should be firm. And you should see the goal, and shouldn't play. Then everything will be fine. Everything is simple, for there's nothing difficult in fact.
Nothing. I should have just stood up and gone.
This is so easy, just to stand up
I
and
just
go.
needed to stand up and not to play, that's it. Later on, I started tracing those very dreams, and basically Lilia has already voiced the topic of incubi in detail. That is, all this was familiar to me, and at the same time it all intensified very strongly.
It was supposed to happen.
Every night.
After all, the system activates all demons so that a person wouldn't escape.
Right.
And it's not because people are so important or something, it's just that, let's say, it treats its investments very carefully.
Feeders.
Sure, it is eating. A human is food, not more. There's nothing sacred there, no conscience or honor.
There is absolutely no morality.
Certainly not. What it inserts into one's head is just like a program in a computer. Then it is implemented when personality supports it. And these are exactly all your sufferings, all your worries. It's the system's feed. At this time you were dying, and you were dying literally, and you understood this. But it's good that you roused yourself a little, that personality possessed sufficient power, that they didn't squeeze you out totally. Otherwise, we wouldn't be sitting next to each other, while the state of subpersonality is extremely hard. I think we'll proceed to it later, but first we will listen about your path.
Yes, and the video life was helping me to stick to the spiritual day and night, 24 hours a day. All these night creatures, and they cannot be called otherwise.
After all, they really exist.
Moreover, at that point, when you are literally in captivity, they're more real for you than anything else which is real. Meaning, consciousness indeed plays
It's not a fruit of morbid imagination. These are real things.
a movie for you in which you are the most downtrodden character, the most devoured character. There were many more points at the same time. There was a sensation all the time that I was like a bitten animal. I mean, when consciousness out of the slightest, that's why it is very important not to have a single thought in spiritual practice. I've traced this moment of unfolding when a tiny thought immediately gives a picture, an image, and you don't notice how you become a participant of this event.
And instead of spiritual practice, you are merely under the system's power already.
And at this time, I noticed such a point that whatever your spiritual life is, that's how you actually live your life. Your life, in all moments, just directly indicates how your spiritual practice or work on yourself is going. Why? If during meditation you haven't learned to watch over thoughts or to concentrate at least on that very warmth, then while talking to someone, you certainly don't control when you have already become angry.
It is self-control while working on yourself.
Naturally.
Say, you were in a religious organization.
Yes.
What's the difference? Let me distract you a little. Let's take Allatra, right? Well, Allatra is not a religion. It's not a sect. Allatra is on its own. What is Allatra? Allatra is, like we have already said, a spiritual component of everything and of all religions, and of everything else. This is exactly Allatra. No matter what anyone calls it, we have talked about this. And in Allatra, we give elementary practices. These practices were used by people millennia and millennia ago. And here's a simple example. It's not for comparison, not in order to show what is better and what is worse. When you were in the religious organization, they had their own directives. They prayed, there were some rites, something else,
Certainly.
and practices. Can you explain the difference?
Yes, the difference is fundamental because only secondary consciousness was being cultivated, nothing more.
Imagination, desire.
Imagination.
You were actually performing prayers. Didn't they teach you to pray?
They taught praying, meaning you write a list of desires, but before that, you certainly praise God.
Wait, explain, please. Explain. What does it mean? I write a list of desires.
It's a very widespread prayer.
Like to Santa Claus. A bike, sweets?
Even better, Santa Claus doesn't fulfill such desires. It's Satan who does this actively. In such and such year, I'll get married, I'll have such and such dress, my husband will be such and such, 50 points regarding husband, this, that, and that, what he should be like. That is, you should write all this in great detail and then you should utter it.
And thereafter, you utter it and praise God.
Well, naturally. And before that, you also praise
So it
him.
turns out that I praise God, then present Him
Yes.
a list and praise Him again.
Well, naturally.
And for this, I'm supposed to get everything.
Yes. The only thing which doesn't relate to any churches.
And a simple question. What about any spiritual salvation? Any spiritual growth
Only utterance of prayer about salvation by the Lord.
of one's soul?
No, not this way. You accept Jesus as the Lord. Well, in any case, the Protestant Church teaches that while uttering a prayer, you recognize Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior, and they sign you up into the ranks of the immortal, so to say.
So I'm signed up just because I utter this.
Right. That is why naturally.
And now for people who don't know, okay? In your opinion, as you understand, is it easy to gain life in fact?
One has to work hard. It's a titanic work.
That's the point.
These are such thorns.
You know, writings of the saints and many more things. Isn't this what true saints were talking about?
True saints did talk about it.
That you should work from morning till night. And even when you sleep, you should work. Isn't it so?
All the time. Not a second, not even a second, but not an instant without it.
So tell me, is there any difference between true saints, what they were saying, and Allatra?
Of course not.
And there cannot be, because we speak of Allatra, we speak of the essence, while manipulation which led to, after all, there is no big difference when our fellow, the priest whom you've talked about, established a sect, desire, or when in the past you were in that organization, desire, boasting, and promises that you'll get something, meaning a freebie.
Right, 100%.
While in fact, guys, you have to work.
One has to work on oneself, yes.
There is no other way, and there cannot be.
And here, everything's important. To write down thoughts, to trace, and also several...
It just means to study.
Of course. There is nothing good in consciousness indeed, and it's really an enemy. My consciousness was hiding behind the fact that 24 hours a day this background was sounding, and I was never left sort of one-on-one, let's say. And it was very important and very significant for seeing that I needed to continue.
That you should work.
Yes, that I should work. There was really this point. On every step, consciousness is ready to throw in.
Until the end of your sojourn.
The main thing is that you should want this.
The main thing is that you shouldn't perceive this. While it will throw in things, whether you want this or not, consciousness is consciousness. Consciousness is a mediator between three-dimensionality and personality. And you can do nothing about this. Consciousness precisely perceives this three-dimensionality, and it's exactly the one that transmits information to personality. Personality doesn't see three-dimensionality and cannot perceive it, and so it's exactly consciousness that dictates and talks.
It's very interesting, all these tricks, meaning I decided again, yes, I need to work on myself.
May I ask a question? Please tell. Did you actually feel a probability that, speaking the language of religion, hell awaited you ahead when you were plunged into this whole sect?
Of course.
In this entire bustle, that subpersonality awaits you.
Firstly, at that time, I was under the attack of consciousness and all those creatures 24 hours a day, and I was already in hell. It wasn't that hell was somewhere ahead, but I was already in this hell. Why? Because the main illusion why I didn't escape When I later on, "You're saying it right, just to slam the door behind me, this is clear now, because I thought that there was a mystery, a miracle, and an authority there. There is no miracle. When you are working on yourself, the greatest miracle, as you say, is when a person is working on himself."
And the very greatest miracle is life. Even the very fact that people are already here and got a chance to gain life eternal is already a tremendous miracle. What can be better or more wonderful? This very fact. Well, generally speaking, your path is clear. And what could you advise to people? Actually, to all people, and in particular to those with whom you were in that sect, both to them and to all people.
Well, just spiritual work in themselves. No other options. There are indeed no other options.
And one shouldn't wait and postpone until tomorrow.
Right.
Let's say, guys, this is not a diet. You shouldn't postpone it until Monday. You should begin to work immediately.
Right now.
Because tomorrow might actually not come. And what can be worse than the impossibility to turn to the other side? You were lucky. You managed to stop in time and kick off from this abyss. But, unfortunately, many people don't understand this. What can be worse than hopelessness? Already nothing. The state of subpersonality is an extreme measure which people, create for ourselves. After all, no one will push a person there, except his own foolishness. While the system is extremely interested, let's say, in people becoming these subpersonalities themselves, it does everything for that. For the system, a subpersonality is again that very food. For a human, it is suffering. It's eternal torments, meaning the worst which you have in life will always prevail, and it will always be with you, for very many centuries sometimes. It won't disappear anywhere, and won't let you go, and it won't loosen its grip. However, at the same time, thoughts remain, self-awareness remains. But there is powerlessness, there is no body, there is nothing, and you cannot reverse this. For the system, it's beneficial because it's a feed for it anyway, and it does a lot in order to support this and to create it all. Well, and again, there's even a simple example. Once we started talking about subpersonalities, about the fact that people feed these subpersonalities. Well, that's also a difficult talk, but it actually concerns all people. When our dear, close people pass away, we cannot help thinking of them. We do think of them. The question is different. Do we share our life with the deceased or not? As a matter of fact, let's say, based on all traditions, we do share, and to a great extent. And whole cults have been established based on this, and the system promotes this quite seriously. I believe Andre will now explain.
After the release of the program about suicide, when we touched upon this topic regarding subpersonality, many people wrote and called us. Everyone is worried about the issue of helping a subpersonality. But I responded to everyone in the same way, sort of. I repeated your words, which you voiced in the program, that this knowledge may be given either to entire humanity simultaneously or to no one. Why? Because otherwise, if this knowledge is given only to some of the people, it will be distorted. So was in the past, and more than once. And the history of humankind knows this. And actually, we can even look at what is now happening in our world. There is no knowledge on this subject nowadays.
However, there is no knowledge on the subject of how, let's say, not to give away life, but to support a subpersonality. After all, by and large, if we face the truth, it's not appropriate for the alive to feed the dead, meaning it's not right to share one's life with the dead, but we cannot forget them either. And here, a little inner dissonance also arises. On the one hand, there are people dear to us who have passed away, and there is a desire to help them. There are various rites for this, many different methods. However, the thing is that when we commemorate them, when we worry about this, even a trite memory which touches us inside, this is exactly sharing life with them. It relieves their state for a short period of time, but doesn't solve their problem, while it turns out that we lose the opportunity
of spiritual realization.
of our spiritual realization. In a certain sense, this is so. We exchange life because we share it with a subpersonality due to our sorrows which come from consciousness and from everything. And we will have to remember them too, because we have nothing else to do. Consciousness will remind us, and they will remind of themselves, and so on. The topic is very grave and acute. I would say, on the one hand, if we look at how beneficial this is for the system, how it promotes this cult of subpersonality, how it promotes the fact that we must remember and commemorate them, it is quite acute. But here, as you are saying, and you are absolutely right in this case, that whole institutions will be established on the basis of this knowledge, which will distort and support precisely the cult of subpersonality, won't they?
I just wanted to give an example. There is such a tradition. It has already been shaped into a culture, which is very contradictory, so to say. It exists in the countries of South and Central America. The religion, or cult, to put it more precisely, is called Santa Muerte, Holy Death.
Holy death.
Yes, the symbol of worship is death dressed in white clothes.
The most interesting thing is that it's exactly a fractal reflection of Christianity. Not replication, but reflection, with a replication. After all, in this cult, even the Virgin Mary is portrayed with a baby in the form of skeletons. The Virgin Mary and the baby.
Well, yes, and basically, there is.
Human sacrifices and everything in the world. It's a terrible thing.
Right, and the Catholic Church is actively against this and considers this cult to be satanic. But nevertheless, in the recent years, especially in the recent years, this cult is becoming particularly popular. And if we approach the study of this topic carefully, we will face the fact that the system actually uses technologies, the so-called Overton windows, and does everything possible to promote this cult, meaning, in actual fact, to promote the cult of subpersonality.
Sure.
And it uses, let's say, the most perfidious tools. Last year, a cartoon was released. We won't mention its title, but it's an Oscar-winning cartoon. It was nominated and won the prize.
It received an Oscar.
Yes, exactly. This cartoon got an Oscar. However, first of all, it's a children's story. It was made for kids. The main character is a 12-year-old boy. Everything seems to be harmless. And in the annotations, it is sort of written that it's propaganda of family values. Yes, but in actual fact, it is precisely about this cult.
About feeding of subpersonality.
And about feeding of subpersonality, yes, specifically. If we disregard everything superficial and leave the essence only, at the beginning of the cartoon, the boy treats this cult neglectfully. The action of this cartoon takes place within one day, the day of commemoration of all the deceased, and the following events occur. As a result of certain peripeteias, he gets into the world of the dead, meets with all his relatives there, and so on.
And he understands the significance, how important it is to feed them.
And he understands the significance of how important it is to feed them because he sees his great-grandfather, whom no one commemorates, and he is dying, and this is terrible. That is, very subtle manipulative tools are being used, and a harsh stereotype is actually being formed in viewers. After all, this is a cartoon, and it is primarily aimed at children.
At children. And this is very important. For we've talked to Lilia about the following. What is embedded in childhood is what a person carries later on throughout the rest of his life.
Moreover, since the main character is a 12-year-old boy, then a parent or say an adult who watches this, they will recommend it precisely to children of this age.
Approximately of this age,
Right. This is exactly the age
of the secondary surge.
of the secondary surge. Yes. Meaning, these are also such
Significant points.
imprints. Yes, serious ones. There is one more very important point which I've encountered. I watched this cartoon, then I started sort of looking at how the system was promoting it very skillfully, how it got the Oscar not by chance at all. Everything is being arranged so skillfully that it is sort of visible that all this is technologically made and promoted, and echoes can already be seen. For instance, I talked to my sister regarding this cartoon, and she said, yes, such a cool cartoon. I watched it in the cinema. I wouldn't have actually done that if my psychologist hadn't recommended it to me.
Psychologists recommended.
Psychologists recommend this cartoon. I say, yet, why did she recommend it to you? Well, because this cartoon is about family values. In actual fact, why did the psychologist recommend this cartoon? Because she subconsciously experiences the fear of death.
This is a key point.
Yes, while in this cartoon, first of all, the life of the dead is shown in such a mild form. It's like all relatives meet up
In
there.
a playful and three-dimensional form.
Right, in a playful and three-dimensional one. Everything is fine. The only major point is that they should be commemorated.
Should be fed.
Right, it is obligatory to have a photograph.
To feed them.
By the way, this is also one of the key points.
And here's the point. Why is all this happening? And why is this organization growing to such an extent? This cult of death, in the Holy Death organization, for example. Why is it spreading so fast? And why is all this being cultivated? What's the point of it all?
For the system?
Basically, why? For the system, it's obviously beneficial.
Well, a trite lack of the knowledge.
Fear. People's fear. After all, one way or another, whether a person is an atheist, a minister of any religion, in any rank, or an ordinary layman concerned about his everyday life, but somewhere deep inside, there, even at the level of consciousness, this person feels, any person feels, that after the physical death, everything doesn't end so simply. Consciousness creates a faith, a hope that everything will be fine. Whereas there is an understanding of what subpersonality is, and that this is suffering, and how terrible it is. And in order to be on the safe side, people create exactly an opportunity for themselves to be sort of on the safe side, to be commemorated and fed later on. They establish these cults. They cultivate them. These are the tools thanks to which they will feel some relief later, after death. And now look, how vivid this is. How to help a deceased person. How to pray for the dead so that they would feel some relief. How to feed a subpersonality. To put it simply, after all, this is very widespread. And why is it widespread? And why do people support it very strongly and intensively? Because of the fear that tomorrow, you yourself will become a subpersonality. And in order not to be forgotten by your progeny, in order not to experience excessive suffering and intolerable hunger, let's call it so, it's better to do this now so that your grandchildren and great-grandchildren and great-great-grandchildren would feed you later on.
In this cartoon, there was a very interesting character, a famous guitarist, well known all over Mexico. And so he even, according to this cartoon, and actually according to a tradition, on the day of commemoration of all the deceased, all the dead ones have the right to return to the world of the living. And there are actually these altars with photographs and so on. So this character didn't even return. There was no such a necessity because he's famous all over Mexico. Everyone loves him. Everyone worships him. He lives in a huge castle.
If we translate all this into such a plane
of its core essence,
then the one who is commemorated and remembered is much better off there.
Yes, it's also interesting that he says such words there. I ain't given so much here that I don't even need that much for myself.
He doesn't experience suffering. He lives happily.
Right, exactly.
The system is the system.
Yes, What's also interesting about this entire scheme is that psychologists recommend this cartoon as a cartoon dedicated to family values. In actual fact, this relates to their inner fear of death.
Not of death, but of the after-death fate.
Yes, exactly. This is what I have meant. So, how do they position themselves? I mean, psychologists. They're people of science, aren't they?
Of course.
While science in our society is separated from religion. So, they don't even have a right to openly speak.
Speak about the soul.
Yes, for ethical reasons, they don't have a right to discuss the matters of soul, God,
But
and
they
so
actually
on.
remain humans. They remain mortal humans. No matter how a person denies God and everything else, he is still mortal and he won't avoid this
Well,
lot.
yes. So, what is sad about this? It is sad that people don't go to church, they don't go to clergymen, to people who are specialists,
Precisely in this field. Yes, this is their domain.
who can actually render qualified assistance, who can support, explain, clarify, generally speaking, what is what and how one should live, which principles one should follow.
But they go to psychologists
They go to psychologists,
because it's fashionable,
to ordinary frightened people just like them.
who don't understand and don't know anything about this, unfortunately. Yes.
And even here in the cartoon, they have made an imprint that one should invest attention in one's deceased ancestors. To cultivate this since childhood, because at the beginning of the cartoon, the boy treated this neglectfully, but at the end of the cartoon, having visited the afterworld,
He understood this value, understood this importance.
He understood this value. He experienced fear, in fact, for there is this imprint there. He experienced fear,
Of course.
and this fear is transmitted to all children. And already having this sort of experience, at the end of the cartoon, he is standing with his half-a-year-old sister near this altar, and he tells her, "Here, look, all these are our relatives. We should remember them."
For kids,
And all this is accompanied by cheerful music. For kids, yes. So, why have we mentioned all this now? Because in actual fact, while starting the discussion of this topic, we have said that if this knowledge is given not to the entire humanity, but only partially, the system will begin to distort it.
For sure.
And it will precisely follow this very path. It will establish an institution, and since childhood, it will start cultivating in people this very...
because there's the fear of death. After all, many people, not even many, the majority, they play at spirituality. They don't know God and don't strive for Him. In order to gain life, one should work very hard, and this is really not a game. We have discussed this with Olya just now. While games, magic, desires, aspirations, elementary mundane things, they distract. They are more colorful. Consciousness is concerned about creating its own future. After all, if a person gets saved spiritually, consciousness as a tool drops off. After all, it's a tool of three-dimensionality. It's not needed. Personality becomes free, gaining life. Whereas, when a person becomes a subpersonality, consciousness remains. That's why it is certainly on the side of...
The most terrible thing about the state of subpersonality is that a person hasn't perceived God during his lifetime, and he doesn't know Him in the state of subpersonality either.
Well, in the state of subpersonality, he already clearly understands and differentiates that there is God, and there is that world, because he's already in that world, but he can no longer get saved. Meaning, what you gain in this life is exactly what remains, and this life is precisely given for this. Many people wonder, why am I in this world? Since I'm here, this means I'm needed for something. But unfortunately, consciousness immediately twists that. Since you are here, hence you are a chosen one, and bargaining with God begins, and so on. Since I am here, hence God has sent me here. Well, God hasn't sent you. God doesn't even know that you are present in this world. This is true. But on the other hand, some people say that God knows and wises everything. He knows and wises there, in the boundless world. While this is, like Olya described it, well, it's a pit, it's a whirlpool that sucks in and absorbs everything. Whoever has escaped from this whirlpool is whom God knows, but the one who became sucked in is sucked in. Why would God care about the dead? God as the parent has to care about the alive.
The dead ones have their own God.
While the dead ones have their own God. Absolutely right.
And by the way, It's also interesting that the Santa Muerte cult, the attributes of the cult are as follows. Death is holding a globe and a scythe in its hands. The scythe symbolizes the transiency of life and the moment of death. And with the scythe, death cuts the silver thread.
These are the echoes of the genuine knowledge that has always been available, while the silver thread is exactly that thread which connects soul and personality. It's the thread thanks to which this personality is formed, that feeds, via this silver thread, exactly from the soul, on that power which consciousness is hunting for. And why is it important for the personality, having received this power, to direct it back with its love? The more, let's say, properly this is done, and the greater the backward input is, you got it, so give it back. The more you receive in return, and the shorter this thread becomes. Up to the merging, well, the more a person spends on distractions, on everyday life, or as Olya has been telling, on suffering and torments, on everything else, then nothing remains there for life. That's when you should indeed take care of that your children and grandchildren remember and think of you as often as possible. Yes, by doing so, they will create poor conditions for themselves, similar to yours, but you will feel some relief. This is what urges people to support these cults. That's why, in order not to take life away from your offspring, you should better start living yourself. And as heritage to your offspring, you should leave life, but not death. And for this, you should precisely cultivate God's love.
And become alive yourself.
And become alive yourself. So guys, let's strive for life. And on this cheerful note of today's quite a sad meeting, I would like to say thank you for attention, friends. Let's love each other. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.